The crystal chandelier shattered the moment her life did. Lady Eliza Harrington stood frozen in her ivory gown while 300 faces turned toward her, not with admiration, but with hunger. Her fiancé's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. She betrayed me. She is nothing but a liar and a whore. The word echoed off marble walls. Gasps became whispers. Whispers became judgment. In 60 seconds, everything she'd built collapsed. This is the story of a woman who fell from grace and clawed her way back, not through mercy, but through war. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Ashford Estate ballroom smelled like roses and ambition. Eliza had noticed that the first time she'd attended a high society event at 17. Now, at 23, the scent was as familiar as her own perfume. She stood near the grand staircase, champagne flute balanced between gloved fingers, watching the cream of English aristocracy swirl past in silks and diamonds. The orchestra played something Viennese, predictable, safe. "You look radiant tonight." Eliza turned. Lord Christopher Winters, her fiancé, stood beside her in his perfectly tailored black coat, his smile the kind that charmed dowagers and disarmed rivals. Handsome in that classical way, strong jaw, clear blue eyes, hair the color of summer wheat. He'd proposed 3 months ago in front of half of London. Everyone said they were a perfect match. "You've said that twice already," Eliza replied, but she smiled. "Are you trying to convince me or yourself?" Christopher laughed, easy and warm. "Neither, just stating facts." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Though I'll confess, I'm eager for this circus to end. My mother invited half the peerage. I'm running out of small talk." "Poor dear. However do you manage?" "By reminding myself that in 6 weeks you'll be my wife and I'll have a legitimate excuse to leave early from every dreadful party." His eyes held hers. "We'll scandalize them all by actually enjoying each other's company." Eliza felt warmth bloom in her chest. This was the Christopher she'd fallen for, the one who rolled his eyes at pompous barons and snuck her onto terraces to escape tedious dinner conversations. Not the stiff political creature he became around his family. 6 weeks, she repeated. Then we escaped to Italy. Venice first, then Florence. Rome, if you insist, though I maintain it's overrated. You maintain everything is overrated except yourself. Not everything. He touched her hand briefly, a gesture small enough to be proper, but intimate enough to matter. Not you. Before she could respond, a servant appeared at Christopher's elbow, whispering something urgent. Christopher's expression shifted, just for a moment, into something harder, focused. "Excuse me," he said. "Estate business. I'll return shortly." He disappeared into the crowd before Eliza could ask what kind of business required attention during a ball. She watched him go, then turned back to the ballroom, letting the music wash over her. Lady Eliza. The voice belonged to Margaret Sutherland, one of her oldest friends. Margaret swept up beside her in emerald green, her dark hair piled into an elaborate arrangement that must have taken her maid 2 hours. "Maggie," Eliza smiled, "you look like you're about to steal someone's husband." "Only if he's rich and doesn't snore." Margaret snagged a glass from a passing servant. "Have you seen the crowd tonight? Half of them look like they'd rather be anywhere else." "That's every society event." "True. But usually they hide it better." Margaret's eyes swept the room. "Something feels off tonight. The energy's strange." Eliza had learned to trust Margaret's instincts. They'd been friends since childhood, back when they'd climbed trees and ruined dresses and driven their governesses to despair. Margaret had a gift for reading rooms, for sensing the undercurrents that most people missed. "Off how?" Eliza asked. Margaret hesitated. "I'm not sure. Just watch yourself tonight." Before Eliza could press further, the music shifted. The waltz ended, and in the brief silence that followed, she heard her name, not spoken, whispered. She turned, scanning faces. Several guests quickly looked away. Others stared openly, their expressions caught between curiosity and something darker. A cold finger traced down her spine. "What's happening?" she asked quietly. Margaret had gone pale. Eliza! The orchestra stopped completely. In the sudden silence, Christopher's voice rang out from the center of the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention. 300 heads turned. Christopher stood on the raised platform where the musicians sat, his face grave. Beside him stood Lord Marcus Thorne, his business partner, a man Eliza had never particularly liked. Too smooth, too calculating. I apologize for the interruption, Christopher continued. His voice carried across the ballroom with practiced ease. But there's a matter that requires immediate address. A matter of honor. Eliza's pulse kicked. Margaret's hand found her arm, gripping tight. For months, Christopher said, I have been a fool, blinded by affection, by trust, by the belief that the woman I intended to marry was worthy of my name. He paused, and in that pause, Eliza felt the ground start to shift beneath her feet. I have learned otherwise. Christopher, Eliza's voice came out strangled. She moved forward, but the crowd had closed around her, a wall of silk and judgment. What are you? Lady Eliza Harrington, Christopher said, and his voice was ice now, all warmth burned away, has been conducting an affair. The word hung in the air like poison. Eliza couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The ballroom spun. That's not, she started, but her voice was drowned by the rising murmur of shock rippling through the crowd. With whom? Someone called out. Christopher's jaw tightened. With Lord Marcus Thorne. The room exploded. Gasps, shouts, the sound of breaking glass as someone dropped their champagne. Eliza stood frozen, her brain refusing to process what she'd just heard. Marcus Thorne? The man standing beside Christopher with an expression of carefully crafted regret. That's a lie! Eliza's voice finally broke free, sharp and desperate. She pushed through the crowd, shoving past shocked faces and clutching hands. Christopher, that's a complete lie. I've never seen... Deny it all you wish. Christopher's eyes met hers across the ballroom, and there was nothing in them. No recognition, no doubt. Just cold, absolute certainty. I have proof. He held up a stack of letters. Even from a distance, Eliza could see her handwriting. Her handwriting. No, she whispered. Love letters, Christopher continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. Explicit correspondence detailing a relationship that began 6 months ago, long before our engagement. He looked at the crowd, his face a mask of wounded nobility. I trusted her with my heart, my name, my future. She repaid that trust with betrayal. Those aren't real, Eliza shouted. She'd reached the edge of the platform now, staring up at the man she'd planned to marry. Christopher, please, you have to listen to me. I never wrote those. I never... Your handwriting, Lady Eliza. Your signature, your seal. Then they're forgeries. Her voice cracked. Tears blurred her vision, hot and furious. Someone forged them. Marcus, tell him this is insane. Marcus Thorne stepped forward, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with false regret. I wish I could, my lady, but I cannot deny what occurred between us. The world tilted. Eliza stared at him, this man she'd spoken to perhaps a dozen times in her entire life, always in Christopher's presence, always with polite distance. He was confessing to an affair that never happened, confirming a lie. Why? You're mad, she breathed. You're both mad. I'm heartbroken. Christopher descended from the platform, moving toward her with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd parted for him. I'm devastated, but I will not allow my name, my family's honor, to be further tainted by your presence. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the calculation in his eyes, hidden beneath the performance of wounded pride. This was planned. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This entire scene, the dramatic announcement, the letters, Marcus's confession, it was all choreographed, rehearsed. Why? The word came out broken. Christopher, why are you doing this? For just a second, something flickered across his face, almost like pity. Then it was gone. Our engagement is ended, he said loudly, addressing the room more than her. Effective immediately. I will not marry a woman of such moral corruption. Monster, Eliza hissed. Tears streamed down her face now, unchecked. You absolute monster! Remove her from my sight. Two servants appeared at her elbows, gripping her arms. Eliza tried to pull away, but her legs wouldn't hold her. The ballroom swam. Faces stared, some shocked, some gleeful, all judging. "Don't touch me!" She wrenched free, stumbling backward. Her heel caught on her gown and she nearly fell. Someone laughed. The sound cut through her like glass. Margaret pushed through the crowd, her face streaked with tears. "Eliza—" "Stay back, Miss Sutherland," Christopher warned, "unless you wish to share her disgrace." Margaret froze. Eliza looked at her friend, her only friend in this room of vipers, and saw fear. Saw the choice being made in real time. Loyalty versus survival. "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered. Eliza turned and ran. She fled through the ballroom doors, her gown tangling around her legs, her vision blurred with tears and rage. Behind her, she heard the whispers start, a rising tide of gossip that would drown her by morning. The corridor stretched endlessly. Servants pressed themselves against the walls as she passed, their eyes wide. She found a side door and burst through it into the night garden, gulping cold air that burned her lungs. The music had started again inside. The party was continuing. Of course it was. Scandal was the best entertainment high society could ask for. Eliza collapsed onto a stone bench, her body shaking with sobs she could no longer contain. Everything. Gone. Her reputation, her engagement, her future. Destroyed in minutes by a lie she couldn't disprove. Why? The question circled endlessly. Why would Christopher do this? What could he possibly gain from publicly destroying her? "My lady?" She looked up. Her father's footman stood a respectful distance away, his face carefully blank. "Your father requests your immediate return home," he said quietly. "He's been informed of the situation." Of course he had. By now, every gossip in London would be racing to spread the news. Lord Harrington's daughter, caught in adultery, the scandal of the season. Eliza stood on trembling legs. Her ivory gown, chosen so carefully for this night, the last ball before her wedding, was stained with champagne and grass. Ruined, like everything else. The carriage ride home passed in a blur. Eliza sat in silence, staring at nothing, while her world finished collapsing around her. When they reached Harrington House, her father was waiting in his study. Lord Edmund Harrington was a tall man, silver-haired and stern, with the kind of rigid backbone that came from 3 generations of military service. He stood as she entered, his face carved from stone. "Is it true?" he asked without preamble. Eliza's throat closed. "No, father, I swear to you, it's not. Is it true?" "No!" The word exploded out of her. "I never had an affair with Marcus Thorne or anyone else. The letters are forgeries. Christopher is lying. I don't know why, but it doesn't matter why." The words hit her like a slap. "What?" she whispered. Her father's jaw worked. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, and she saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Disappointment so deep it looked like grief. "The accusation has been made," he said finally, "publicly, in front of the entire aristocracy. Whether it's true or false is irrelevant." "Irrelevant? Father, my life—" "Your reputation is destroyed, Eliza. Do you understand that?" His voice rose slightly, cracking at the edges. "By morning, every household in London will be discussing your shame. Every gentleman who might have overlooked scandal will turn away. Every family who valued our alliance will cut ties to protect themselves." "But I didn't do anything." "You don't have to!" The shout echoed through the study. Eliza flinched. Her father turned away, one hand gripping the mantel above the fireplace. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "In our world, perception is truth. You know this. I raised you to know this." He took a shaking breath. "Lord Winters has proof. Witnesses. Your own handwriting. What you actually did or didn't do is a philosophical question. Society doesn't care about philosophy." Eliza felt the room tilt. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "So that's it?" Her voice came out small, broken. "I'm just ruined? And no one will even try to discover the truth?" Her father turned back to her, and the look on his face was answer enough. "You're leaving," he said. Tomorrow morning, I'm sending you to the countryside estate. You'll remain there until this scandal fades. If it fades. That could be years. Then it's years. Father, please, this discussion is over. He moved to his desk, picking up papers with trembling hands. Pack what you need. The carriage leaves at dawn. Eliza stared at him, this man who'd taught her to ride, who'd read her stories, who'd promised to always protect her. And now he was exiling her without a fight. You believe him, she said softly. Don't you? You actually believe I did this? Her father's hand stilled on the papers. He didn't look up. Go to bed, Eliza. She left without another word. Her mother was waiting in her bedroom. Lady Catherine Harrington sat in the window seat, her face pale in the moonlight. She stood as Eliza entered, and for a moment Eliza thought she might offer comfort, might believe her daughter's innocence. Then her mother spoke. How could you be so stupid? Eliza stopped dead. What? If you were going to have an affair, and truly, Eliza, I cannot fathom why you would risk everything for someone like Marcus Thorne. You should have been more careful. Her mother's voice was ice. Discreet. Protected. Mother, I didn't. Don't lie to me. Catherine moved closer, her silk dressing gown rustling. I've covered for your father's indiscretions for 25 years. I know how these things work. What I don't know is how you were foolish enough to get caught. The words punched the air from Eliza's lungs. You don't believe me either. Her mother's expression didn't change. It doesn't matter what I believe. What matters is what society believes. And right now, society believes you're a whore. The word, the same word Christopher had used, landed like a physical blow. Get out, Eliza whispered. Eliza, get out of my room. Her mother's lips thinned, but she left without further argument. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a coffin ceiling. Eliza stood alone in her bedroom, the room she'd lived in since childhood, filled with books and drawings and memories, and felt the last thread of hope snap. No one believed her. No one would fight for her. She was alone. She walked to her vanity on numb legs and stared at her reflection. Her carefully arranged hair had fallen loose. Her makeup was streaked with tears. The expensive gown hung off her shoulders like a costume from someone else's life. She didn't recognize the woman looking back. With mechanical precision, she began removing her jewelry. The sapphire earrings Christopher had given her for her birthday. The pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. The engagement ring. God, the engagement ring. She pulled it off and held it up to the light. It caught the moon, throwing fractured rainbows across the wall. Beautiful, expensive, meaningless. She threw it across the room. It pinged off the mirror and skittered under the bed. Then she sat down at her writing desk and did the only thing she could think to do. She started writing the truth. My name is Lady Eliza Harrington. I am 23 years old. On the night of December 14th, 1852, my life was destroyed by lies. Her hand shook as she wrote, but she forced herself to continue. Every detail, every moment, everything she'd seen in Christopher's eyes when he'd made his accusation. The careful choreography of the scene, Marcus Thorne's rehearsed confession. I do not know why this was done to me. I do not know what I did to deserve this cruelty. But I swear, on everything I hold sacred, that I am innocent. She wrote until dawn broke over London, until the carriages started rolling through the streets below, until she heard footsteps in the hall and knew her time was up. When the knock came, she was ready. The countryside estate sat 60 miles from London, surrounded by woods and meadows and blessed, terrible silence. Eliza arrived on a gray afternoon, exhausted from travel and numb from shock. The house was smaller than the London residence, only 15 rooms instead of 30, but it felt cavernous. Empty. Mrs. Beatrice Whitmore, the elderly housekeeper, met her at the door with sympathetic eyes and pressed lips. She asked no questions. Eliza was grateful for that. Your rooms are prepared, my lady, Mrs. Whitmore said. I've had a fire lit. You'll want to rest. Eliza nodded mutely and followed her upstairs. The guest bedroom overlooked the gardens, wild and overgrown now in winter, but she could imagine them in spring, green and alive and far from the poisonous whispers of London society. "Will you be needing anything else?" Mrs. Whitmore asked. "No, thank you." The housekeeper hesitated at the door. "My lady, I don't believe what they're saying." Eliza looked up sharply. Mrs. Whitmore's weathered face was kind. "I've known you since you were a girl. You've always been good, honest. Whatever happened in London, it wasn't your doing." Tears pricked Eliza's eyes. "Thank you," she managed. When the door closed, she finally let herself cry. Not the desperate, panicked sobs from the night before, but something deeper. Grieving. She'd lost everything, and winter was only beginning. The first week passed in a fog. Eliza slept. She woke. She stared at walls. She refused meals until Mrs. Whitmore forced broth down her throat. She existed, but barely. Letters arrived from London. She burned them without reading. In the second week, anger began to seep in. She started walking the grounds, restless energy driving her into the cold. She walked until her feet ached and her lungs burned, and her mind finally, mercifully, went quiet. On one of these walks, she found the old stables. They were half collapsed, abandoned years ago when her father had moved the horses to London. Eliza pushed through the creaking door and found herself in a space filled with dust and memories. Her first riding lessons had been here. Her first fall. The first time she'd galloped across the meadow, feeling wild and free and invincible. She sank onto an old hay bale and let herself remember what it felt like to be happy. When she finally returned to the house, Mrs. Whitmore was waiting with worried eyes and hot tea. "You'll catch your death out there," the housekeeper scolded gently. "Would that be such a loss?" Eliza asked. Mrs. Whitmore's face crumpled. "Don't say such things." But Eliza meant it. Some days, death felt easier than this slow suffocation of exile and shame. Still, she kept walking, kept breathing, kept existing, because somewhere, buried beneath the grief and rage, a small voice whispered, "This isn't over." January came with snow and brutal cold. Eliza stopped reading the letters from London, but she couldn't stop them from arriving. Her father's correspondence was terse, factual. "Remain where you are. Do not contact anyone. I will inform you when circumstances change." Her mother didn't write at all. Margaret sent one letter full of apologies and excuses and barely concealed fear. Eliza burned it without finishing. The isolation was absolute. And then one night in late January, the storm came. It started as wind, howling across the moors with the sound of wolves, then sleet, turning the world to ice. By midnight, snow fell so thick Eliza couldn't see the gardens from her window. She stood watching the storm rage, feeling oddly calm. At least the weather matched her life now, violent, unpredictable, destructive. A pounding at the door made her jump. She heard Mrs. Whitmore's voice downstairs, sharp with alarm. Then men's voices, deep, commanding. Eliza grabbed a shawl and hurried to the landing, looking down into the entrance hall. 3 men stood there, covered in snow, breathing hard. Travelers caught in the storm. One was a servant, another a guard. The third. Eliza's breath caught. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair plastered to his skull by melted snow. His coat was expensive, his bearing aristocratic despite being soaked and half frozen. When he looked up and his eyes met hers across the hall, she felt a jolt of recognition. Not because she knew him, because everyone in England knew him. Duke Adrian Blackmore, the most powerful, most feared nobleman in the country, the man who'd made ministers tremble and brought down trading companies with a word. Cold, calculating, ruthless. And he was standing in her entrance hall. "My apologies for the intrusion," he said, his voice carrying easily through the space. "The storm made travel impossible. We require shelter for the night." Mrs. Whitmore was already bustling, calling for servants, ordering fires lit, but Eliza barely heard her. She stared down at the Duke, and he stared back. And in that moment, she knew with absolute certainty everything was about to change again. The Duke didn't move from the entrance hall for a long moment, water pooling around his boots on the marble floor. His eyes, dark gray, almost black in the dim light, remained fixed on Eliza where she stood frozen on the landing. She should descend, greet him properly, play the role of gracious hostess, despite the fact that she was a disgraced woman in exile and he was the last person she'd ever expected to see. Instead, she gripped the banister and stared back. Mrs. Whitmore broke the tension. Your Grace, if you'll follow me, I'll have rooms prepared immediately. We've fires going in the East Wing. That won't be necessary. The Duke's voice was measured, emotionless. We'll be gone by morning once the storm breaks. The storm won't break by morning, Eliza said. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. It's going to get worse before it gets better. You'll be here at least 2 days. The Duke's gaze flicked back to her. One dark eyebrow raised slightly. You're a meteorologist now, Lady Harrington? So he knew who she was. Of course he did. Everyone knew who she was. The scandalous woman who'd slept with her fiancé's business partner. The fallen lady. The cautionary tale mothers would tell their daughters for years. I've lived here long enough to read the weather, she replied, forcing herself to descend the stairs. Her legs felt unsteady, but she kept her chin up. January storms in this region last 3 days minimum. The roads will be impassable until they clear. Then we'll impose on your hospitality. The Duke shrugged out of his soaked coat. Beneath it, he wore a dark waistcoat that hugged a frame built more like a soldier's than a nobleman's, though I suspect my presence isn't particularly welcome. Should it be? His mouth curved, not quite a smile. No, probably not. Mrs. Whitmore looked between them nervously. My lady, perhaps you should— Show His Grace to the blue room, Eliza interrupted. His men can take the servants' quarters. They'll be more comfortable near the kitchen fires. She turned her attention to the Duke's guard and servant, both of whom looked half frozen. Mrs. Whitmore will see you fed and warm. The servant, a young man with kind eyes, nodded gratefully. The guard remained stone-faced, watching everything with professional suspicion. And you, Your Grace, Eliza continued, meeting the Duke's gaze directly, will join me in the drawing room once you've changed into something that isn't dripping on my floor. She didn't wait for his response. She turned and walked toward the drawing room, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. Duke Adrian Blackmore. Here. In her house. The man who controlled half the trade routes in England, who'd destroyed political careers with carefully placed words, who was rumored to have driven a rival to suicide through sheer strategic brilliance. What the hell was he doing at a minor countryside estate in the middle of winter? She poured herself a brandy with shaking hands and drank it in one burning swallow. 20 minutes later, the Duke appeared in the doorway. He'd changed into dry clothes, simple but obviously expensive, the kind of understated elegance that screamed wealth louder than any embroidery. His dark hair was no longer plastered to his skull, but it was still damp, pushed back from a face that was all sharp angles and cold assessment. You're bolder than I expected, he said without preamble. Excuse me? Most women in your position would be cowering, apologetic, desperate for approval. He moved into the room like he owned it, all casual power. You're standing here drinking brandy and giving orders like you still have the right. Eliza felt heat rise in her chest, half anger, half something else. And what position is that exactly? Disgraced, ruined, exiled. He picked up the brandy decanter, examining it. Though I suppose when you've already lost everything, there's no point in pretending to be meek. Get out of my house. Your father's house, technically. He poured himself a drink. And no, the storm, remember? Eliza set her glass down before she threw it. What do you want? At this exact moment? To get warm. To eat something that isn't frozen. To not die of pneumonia. He took a sip of brandy, his expression unchanging. Tomorrow, we can discuss business. We have no business, don't we? The Duke settled into the chair across from her with the ease of someone who'd never been uncomfortable anywhere in his life. Tell me, Lady Harrington, do you actually believe you had an affair with Marcus Thorne? The question hit her like cold water. What? It's a simple question. Do you believe the accusations against you are true? Of course not. I never— She stopped, her mind racing. Why are you asking me this? Because I need to know if you're delusional or simply a victim. Rage flared white hot. How dare you? Delusional people are useless to me, the Duke continued as if she hadn't spoken. They rewrite their own histories, convince themselves of lies. Victims, on the other hand, victims can be powerful, if they're angry enough. Eliza stared at him. You think I was framed? I don't think anything. I know. He set his glass down with a soft click. Lord Christopher Winters and Marcus Thorne orchestrated the entire scandal. The letters were forgeries. The confession was rehearsed. Your reputation was destroyed as part of a calculated business transaction. The room spun. Eliza sat down hard, her legs giving out. How do you know that? Because I'm the one they were negotiating with. Silence crashed through the drawing room. The Duke watched her with those cold gray eyes, his expression unreadable. 6 months ago, Winters and Thorne approached me about a shipping venture. They needed capital, significant capital. I had conditions. One of them was that Winters dissolve his engagement to you. Why? The word barely made it past her lips. Because you're Lord Edmund Harrington's only child, his heir. When you marry, your husband gains control of the Harrington Holdings, textile factories, mining operations, property across 3 counties. The Duke leaned forward slightly. Winters wanted that control, but he also wanted my money. He couldn't have both. Eliza's mind reeled. So he destroyed me instead. He destroyed your reputation so thoroughly that no respectable man would marry you, ensuring the Harrington fortune would eventually default to distant cousins, whom Winters had already made arrangements with. The Duke's voice remained perfectly level, like he was discussing grain prices. It was efficient, brutal, and completely legal. You knew. The realization slammed into her. You knew what he was planning, and you let it happen. Yes. The single word hung between them. Eliza lunged out of her chair. Her hand cracked across the Duke's face before she'd consciously decided to move. His head snapped to the side. For 3 seconds, he didn't react. Then he turned back to look at her, a red mark blooming across his cheek. Feel better? He asked. No. Her hand throbbed. Her whole body shook. Why are you telling me this? Do you think I'll thank you for your honesty? Forgive you? I think you'll help me destroy them. She laughed, a broken, desperate sound. You're insane. Winters and Thorne took my money. Then they failed to deliver on their promises. Spectacularly. The Duke stood, towering over her. The shipping venture collapsed. My investment is gone. They've made me look like a fool. So this is about your pride. This is about power. His voice dropped, taking on an edge that raised the hair on her arms. They cheated me. That cannot stand. But I can't move against them directly, not without proof of fraud, and they were too careful. However, he paused, and something that might have been satisfaction flickered across his face. If someone were to expose the forged letters, reveal the conspiracy behind your ruined reputation, cause a scandal so explosive that it would destroy their credibility completely, well, that would be almost as satisfying. Eliza stared at him. You want to use me as a weapon. I want to give you a weapon. What you do with it is your choice. And if I refuse? The Duke shrugged. Then you rot here in exile while Winters and Thorne prosper, while they laugh about how easily they disposed of you, while every person in London continues to believe you're a whore who got exactly what she deserved. The word, that word again, made her flinch. The Duke noticed. That's what they call you, you know, in the clubs, the drawing rooms. Your name has become shorthand for moral failure. Don't be an Eliza, mothers tell their daughters. You don't want to end up like Lady Harrington. Stop, her voice cracked. Why? It's the truth. You wanted honesty. Here it is. They've turned you into a ghost story, a warning, and in 6 months, a year, you'll be forgotten entirely. He moved closer, and she could smell snow and brandy and something darker underneath. Unless you fight back. How? The question escaped before she could stop it. You said yourself they were careful. I have no proof, no evidence. Just my word against theirs, and my word means nothing anymore. Your word means nothing, but mine does. The Duke's eyes glinted. I have resources, connections, money. I can find proof, but I need time, and I need you to trust me. Trust you? Eliza felt something hysterical building in her chest. You just admitted you enabled my destruction. Oh, I enabled a business transaction. I didn't anticipate... He paused, and for the first time, something like discomfort crossed his features. I didn't anticipate the execution would be quite so vicious. How kind of you to feel bad about it. I don't feel bad. The Duke's voice went flat again. I feel inconvenienced. They made me complicit in their scheme and then failed to uphold their end. That's unacceptable. You want revenge. I want retribution. Our goals align. Eliza wanted to scream, to throw him out into the storm, to reject everything he was offering because it came from the man who'd helped ruin her life. But underneath the rage, a cold, calculating part of her brain was already working. He was right. She had nothing, no allies, no evidence, no path forward, just exile and shame and slow suffocation. This man, this cold, ruthless bastard, was offering her a chance to fight back. What would you need from me? She asked quietly. The Duke smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Everything. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm howled louder. Tell me, Eliza said. The Duke settled back into his chair, steepling his fingers. First, I need you to stop hiding. The frightened exile act has to end. You'll return to society. I can't. My father? Your father will do what I tell him to do. I hold the mortgages on 2 of his properties and half his mining shares. When I say you're returning to London, he'll agree. The Duke's tone suggested this was a trivial detail. You'll reappear at social events, calm, dignified, unbowed. They'll crucify me. They'll try. And you'll smile through it, because while they're whispering behind their fans, I'll be gathering evidence, finding witnesses, pulling apart the conspiracy piece by piece. Eliza's throat tightened. That could take months, years. 6 weeks. She laughed bitterly. Impossible. I don't deal in impossible. The Duke leaned forward. In 6 weeks, there's a major parliamentary session. Winters is trying to secure a position. If we move before then, we can destroy him publicly at the height of his ambitions. Maximum damage. And Thorne? Thorne is a parasite. Without Winters, he'll collapse on his own. The Duke's expression darkened. Though I may arrange something special for him regardless. Eliza's hands clenched in her lap. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of enduring society's contempt while this man, this stranger who'd helped orchestrate her downfall, worked behind the scenes. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was the only option she had. If I do this, she said slowly, and you fail, if this doesn't work, I'll be even more destroyed than I already am. Yes. You're not even going to pretend otherwise? Would you believe me if I did? The Duke tilted his head. You're not stupid, Lady Harrington. You understand the stakes. You're either going to trust me or you're not. False reassurances won't change that calculation. She hated that he was right. Why should I trust you at all? She met his gaze. You enabled this. You could be lying about everything. I could be, he agreed. But consider, if I wanted to hurt you further, I could simply leave you here to rot. I could spread worse rumors. I could make your exile permanent. He paused. I'm offering you a partnership because it serves my interests. That's more reliable than altruism. You're a bastard. Frequently. He stood, moving to the window where snow battered the glass. But I'm a bastard who keeps his word. I'll destroy Winters and Thorne. And when I do, your reputation will be restored as a side effect. Not because I care about your honor, but because truth is the most effective weapon I have. Eliza watched him silhouette against the storm. Tall, powerful, absolutely certain of himself. She thought about Christopher's face when he'd announced her betrayal, the satisfaction poorly hidden beneath false hurt, the way he'd looked at her like she was nothing. She thought about her father's disappointment, her mother's disgust, Margaret's fear. She thought about months of isolation, of silence, of slowly disappearing. I want conditions, she said. The Duke turned. Name them. First, I'm not a pawn. If we're doing this, I'm involved in every decision, every strategy. You don't move without telling me. Agreed. Second, when this is over, you leave me alone. No debts, no obligations, we're done. Agreed. Third, she hesitated. If you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate game, I'll find a way to destroy you. I don't care if it takes the rest of my life. The Duke's mouth curved into something that might have been respect. Noted. Anything else? Yes, I want to know why you're really doing this. She moved closer, searching his face. You said it's about power and retribution, but there's something else, something personal. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, Winters reminded me of someone who thought they could use me and walk away unscathed. His voice went very quiet. They were wrong. So is he. It wasn't a full answer, but it was real. She could hear it in the razor edge of old pain beneath the words. All right, Eliza said. I'll do it. The Duke extended his hand. Then we have an arrangement. She stared at his outstretched hand. Once she shook it, there was no going back. She'd be trusting this man, this ruthless, calculating stranger, with everything. She gripped his hand. His fingers were warm despite the cold, his handshake firm. Don't make me regret this, she said. I'll try not to. He released her hand. Now, I suggest you get some sleep. Tomorrow we start planning your resurrection. He left without another word. Eliza stood alone in the drawing room, the fire burning low, the storm raging outside. She'd just made a deal with the devil. She poured herself another brandy and raised the glass to her reflection in the window. To revenge, she whispered. The storm answered with thunder. The next morning dawned gray and bitter cold. Eliza woke to find snow piled 3 feet high against the windows. The house was freezing despite the fires, and she could hear wind still screaming across the moors. She dressed quickly in layers, wool and flannel, practical clothes she'd never have worn in London. When she descended to breakfast, she found the Duke already there, reading a newspaper like this was a casual country visit. Sleep well? He asked without looking up. No. She poured herself tea. Did you? Never do. He turned a page. Your housekeeper is terrified of me. She's been hovering outside the dining room for 10 minutes trying to work up the courage to ask if I need anything. That's because you radiate menace. It's one of my better qualities. He finally looked up. Sit. We have work to do. Eliza sat across from him, cradling her tea. The storm hasn't broken. No, which gives us time to plan without interruption. The Duke folded the newspaper. Tell me everything about the night of the ball. Every detail. Every person who was involved. Why? You already know what happened. I know the broad strokes. I need specifics. Who spoke to you before the announcement? Who looked surprised? Who didn't? His eyes sharpened. Someone in that ballroom knew what was coming. I need to know who. Eliza closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that night. The music, the champagne. Christopher's smile before everything shattered. Margaret Sutherland, she said slowly. My friend. She said the energy felt strange. She warned me to watch myself, but she didn't say why. Could she have known? I don't think so. Maggie's not a good liar. If she'd known, I would have seen it. Eliza paused. But someone might have told her something. A rumor. Gossip. The Duke made a note. Paul. Who else? Lord Ashford was there. Christopher's father. He looked satisfied, proud. Bile rose in her throat, like he was watching a well-executed plan. He probably was. Winters likely had his father's blessing. Another note. Anyone else? Eliza thought harder. Lady Pemberton. She was standing near the front when Christopher made his announcement. She didn't look shocked. She looked eager, like she'd been waiting for entertainment. Pemberton's a gossip. Could be a source of information later. The Duke tapped his pen against the paper. What about the letters? Did you see them clearly? Not clearly, but they were in my handwriting, or close enough that I couldn't tell the difference from a distance. Which means they hired a professional forger. Expensive, traceable. The Duke leaned back. That's our opening. Forgers talk, especially if properly motivated. How do we find them? We don't. I have people who specialize in finding people who'd rather not be found. He studied her. You'll need to prepare yourself for what comes next. Returning to London isn't going to be pleasant. I'm aware. Are you? The Duke's gaze was sharp. They're going to say vicious things to your face, behind your back. They'll exclude you from events, cut you in public. Your former friends will pretend not to know you. They already do that, Eliza said flatly. It's going to get worse before it gets better, because when you return, you won't be begging forgiveness. You'll be acting like you have nothing to apologize for. That will enrage them. Good. The single word came out harder than she'd intended. The Duke's eyebrow raised. Good, he repeated. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of hiding. Eliza set her teacup down with enough force to rattle the saucer. If they want to be enraged, let them. I'm done cowering. Something shifted in the Duke's expression. Approval, maybe, or recognition. Then we'll give them something to be enraged about, he said. They spent the rest of the morning planning. The Duke laid out his strategy with military precision. Who to approach, who to avoid, what events to attend, what statements to make. Eliza listened, occasionally arguing, more often agreeing. He was brilliant. She hated to admit it, but he was. He saw 3 moves ahead, anticipated reactions, identified weaknesses in people she'd known for years but never truly understood. Winters has a gambling problem, the Duke said at one point. Not widely known, but I have documentation. He's in debt to several unpleasant people. How does that help us? Desperate men make mistakes. If we apply pressure in the right places, he'll panic. Panicked people confess. The Duke made another note. We'll start spreading rumors, subtle ones, questions about his finances, his business judgment, his honesty. Won't he know it's us? He'll suspect. He won't be able to prove it. The Duke looked up. That's the art of this. Everything we do has to be deniable. We're not attacking him directly. We're simply encouraging society to reconsider their opinions. It was manipulative, underhanded, ruthless. Eliza loved it. What about Marcus Thorne? She asked. The Duke's expression darkened. Thorne is mine. Don't worry about him. There was something in his tone that made Eliza's skin prickle. She decided not to push. By afternoon, the storm had intensified. Snow fell so thick the windows were nearly obscured. The temperature dropped until even the fires couldn't keep the cold at bay. Eliza found herself back in the drawing room, restless energy making it impossible to sit still. The Duke had retreated to his room to write correspondence, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She hated being alone with her thoughts. A knock at the door made her turn. Mrs. Whitmore entered, wringing her hands. My lady, I'm worried about the supplies. If this storm continues, we might run short on... We'll be fine, Mrs. Whitmore. We've weathered worse. It's not just that. The housekeeper lowered her voice. The Duke's guard has been asking questions about you, about what happened in London. Eliza's stomach tightened. What did you tell him? Nothing. I'd never... Mrs. Whitmore looked genuinely distressed. But he's persistent, and he's been watching you. I don't trust him. You don't need to trust him. He works for the Duke. That's what worries me. Mrs. Whitmore moved closer. My lady, please be careful. The Duke is a dangerous man. Whatever arrangement you've made with him is necessary, Eliza interrupted firmly. I appreciate your concern, truly, but I know what I'm doing. The housekeeper didn't look convinced, but she bobbed a curtsy and left. Eliza stared after her, doubt creeping in despite her confident words. Did she know what she was doing? She'd agreed to partner with a man who'd admitted to enabling her destruction, who saw her as a useful tool rather than a person, who operated by rules she barely understood. But what choice did she have? She was still wrestling with that question when the Duke appeared in the doorway. We have a problem, he said. Eliza's pulse spiked. What kind of problem? The kind that requires immediate action. He held up a letter. One of my contacts in London just sent word. Winters and Thorne are planning to finalize their next venture, a massive land acquisition that will make them both obscenely wealthy. If that goes through before we move against them, they'll be untouchable. When is it happening? 4 weeks. But you said we had 6 weeks. I was wrong. The Duke's jaw tightened. We need to move faster, which means you need to return to London now, not in a few weeks, now. The storm will break tomorrow. We leave the day after. Eliza felt the ground shift beneath her feet again. I'm not ready. You'll never be ready, but you're capable, and that's more important. The Duke crossed to her. I need you in London. I need you visible, attending events, making people question their assumptions about you. They'll destroy me all over again. or you'll destroy them first." His voice softened, just slightly. "I won't lie to you, Lady Harrington. This is going to be brutal. You're going to want to quit, to hide, to run back here and never face them again." "Then why should I do it?" "Because the alternative is living the rest of your life as the woman they made you. The scandal, the cautionary tale." He paused. "Is that really who you want to be?" The question hung in the air. Eliza thought about her father's disappointment, her mother's disgust, the whispers that would follow her forever. She thought about Christopher's smug face, Marcus Thorne's false confession. She thought about rage, clean and cold and sharp. "No," she said quietly, "that's not who I want to be." "Then prove it." The challenge in his voice sparked something fierce in her chest. "Fine," she said. "We leave when the storm breaks, but I want one thing in return." "Name it." "When we destroy them, and we will destroy them, I want to be there. I want to see their faces when they realize what's happening. I want them to know it was me." The Duke smiled. It was a predator's smile, all teeth and no warmth. "Done," he said. They shook hands again, sealing the bargain. Outside, the storm reached its peak. Thunder cracked like the world splitting open. Lightning turned the snow blue-white. And inside, Eliza felt something shift in her bones. She'd been a victim, frightened, broken. Not anymore. The storm broke on the third day, just as Eliza had predicted. She woke to silence, the kind of deep, crystalline quiet that only comes after violent weather. When she looked out her window, the world was transformed. Snow covered everything in pristine white, glittering in weak sunlight. Beautiful, deceptive, like high society itself. She dressed carefully that morning, not in the practical wool she'd worn for months, but in a deep blue gown she'd brought from London and never had the courage to wear. She pinned her hair up properly, applied subtle makeup. When she looked in the mirror, she almost recognized herself. The Duke was waiting in the entrance hall, his bags already packed. He looked her over with an appraising eye. "Better," he said. "You look like someone worth destroying a reputation for." Was that supposed to be a compliment? It was supposed to be accurate. He turned to his guard. "Have the carriage prepared. We leave within the hour." Mrs. Whitmore appeared, her eyes red-rimmed. "My lady, are you certain about this?" Eliza hugged the older woman, something she'd rarely done before. "I'm certain. Thank you for everything." "You'll write?" "If I can." Mrs. Whitmore pulled back, gripping Eliza's hands. "You're stronger than they know, stronger than you know. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Eliza's throat tightened. "I won't." An hour later, the carriage rolled down the snow-covered drive. Eliza looked back once at the estate, her prison, her refuge, her exile. Then she turned forward and didn't look back again. The journey to London took 2 days. They stopped at coaching inns where the Duke's name ensured the best rooms and discreet service. Eliza kept to herself, rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd act, who she'd become. On the second evening, as they neared the city, the Duke joined her in the private dining room he'd secured. "Tomorrow, you'll return to Harrington House," he said without preamble. "Your father has been informed. He'll accept your presence." "Will he actually speak to me?" "Eventually. Once I've made clear the alternative is financial ruin." The Duke poured wine. "You'll attend Lady Morrison's winter ball 3 days from now. It's the first major event of the season. Everyone will be there." "Including Christopher and Marcus?" "Undoubtedly." The Duke's eyes glinted. "Which is why you'll be spectacular, beautiful, confident, unbothered by their presence." "I don't know if I can." "You can, because I'll be there." He paused. "Not with you, that would raise questions, but watching. If anything goes wrong, I'll intervene." It shouldn't have been comforting, but somehow it was. "What happens after the ball?" Eliza asked. "Then the real work begins. I'll start releasing information, carefully, strategically. By the time we're done, Winters and Thorne won't know what hit them." Eliza raised her glass. "To revenge." The Duke touched his glass to hers. "To retribution." They drank in silence, two damaged people bound by mutual destruction. London appeared on the horizon the next morning, gray and vast and utterly unforgiving. Eliza stared at it through the carriage window, her heart hammering. Somewhere in that city, Christopher Winters was probably sleeping peacefully, convinced he'd won, convinced she was broken beyond repair. He was wrong. The carriage rolled through familiar streets, past houses where she'd attended parties, shops where she'd bought ribbons and books, a life that seemed like it belonged to someone else now. When they reached Harrington House, her father stood on the steps. Lord Edmund Harrington looked older than she remembered. Gray, tired, but his spine was still rigid, his expression still unreadable. Eliza descended from the carriage, her legs unsteady. "Father," she said quietly. He looked at her for a long moment, then, "Welcome home, Eliza." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't even warmth, but it was acknowledgement. She'd take it. Behind her, the Duke's carriage rolled away without stopping. He'd done his part, delivered her to London, set the pieces in motion. Now it was her turn to play. Eliza climbed the steps to her childhood home, spine straight, head high. The war was just beginning. The war was just beginning. Eliza's first night back in Harrington House passed in suffocating silence. Her father retired to his study immediately after a tense dinner where neither of them spoke beyond necessary pleasantries. Her mother didn't appear at all, a pointed absence that said more than words ever could. The servants moved around her like ghosts, their eyes downcast, their whispers following her through hallways that had once felt like home. Now they felt like a museum of someone else's life. She lay awake in her old bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to London's nighttime sounds filtering through the windows. Carriages. Distant laughter. The city that had once embraced her and now wanted her destroyed. 3 days until Lady Morrison's ball. 3 days to prepare for war. The next morning, a note arrived with breakfast. Heavy paper, sealed with black wax. The Duke's handwriting was sharp and efficient. "Dressmaker at noon. Don't argue. You need armor." Eliza almost smiled. Armor. He understood that much, at least. The dressmaker arrived precisely at noon, a severe French woman named Madame Rousseau who swept into the drawing room like she owned it. She circled Eliza with critical eyes, making small, disapproving sounds. "Too thin," she announced. "The exile has not been kind to you." "No," Eliza agreed. "It hasn't. But we work with what we have." Madame Rousseau snapped her fingers, and 2 assistants appeared with fabric samples. "His Grace has very specific instructions. You will shine. You will devastate. You will make every woman in that ballroom feel inadequate." "That's the goal?" "That is always the goal, chérie." The dressmaker held up a bolt of deep crimson silk. "But in your case, it is also revenge." Eliza touched the fabric. It was beautiful, dangerous, the kind of dress that demanded attention. "How much did he tell you?" she asked quietly. Madame Rousseau's expression softened, just slightly. "Enough. I know what they did to you. I know you are fighting back." She leaned closer. "I have dressed many women going into battle. Society is war, non. We give you the weapons you need." For 3 hours, Eliza stood while Madame Rousseau and her assistants measured, pinned, draped, and argued in rapid French. The dress that emerged from their chaos was stunning, crimson silk that hugged her figure, with a neckline that was daring without being scandalous. Elegant, powerful, unapologetic. "You will wear your hair up," Madame Rousseau instructed. "Simple, classical. Let the dress speak. And jewelry, just this." She produced a necklace, a single ruby pendant that caught the light like blood. "It's perfect," Eliza whispered. "Of course it is. I do not make mistakes." The dressmaker packed her supplies. "The dress will be delivered tomorrow. Wear it with confidence, chérie. Make them remember who you were before they destroyed you." After she left, Eliza stood in front of the mirror in her undergarments, studying her reflection. Madame Rousseau was right. She was too thin. The months of exile had carved away softness, leaving sharp edges, hollow cheeks, collarbones too prominent. But there was strength there too, in the set of her jaw, the directness of her gaze. She looked like someone who could survive anything. She needed to become someone who could win. The next day brought a different kind of preparation. The Duke arrived mid-morning, unannounced, striding into the drawing room like he'd been invited. Your father's not home, Eliza said, not bothering with pleasantries. I know, I made sure of it. The Duke tossed a folder onto the table between them. We need to rehearse. Rehearse what? Everything. How you'll enter, who you'll speak to, what you'll say when someone inevitably insults you. He settled into a chair. You're going to face a firing squad tomorrow night. I need to know you won't break. Eliza's spine stiffened. I won't break. Prove it. The Duke's eyes went cold. I'm Lady Pemberton. I just saw you enter the ballroom. What do I say? What do I say, Lady Harrington? His voice took on a false sweetness that made her skin crawl. My goodness, how brave of you to show your face after everything that's happened. Tell me, is it true about you and Lord Thorne? The details were so deliciously scandalous. Eliza felt heat rise in her chest. You don't get to speak to me that way. I'm not speaking to you that way. Lady Pemberton is. The Duke leaned forward. And tomorrow night she will, along with dozens of others. So answer the question. What do you say? Eliza's mind raced. Every response felt wrong, too defensive, too angry, too vulnerable. I'd say nothing, she finally managed. I'd walk away. Wrong. The Duke's voice cracked like a whip. Walking away looks like shame, like guilt. You stand your ground, you smile, and you say something that makes her regret speaking. Like what? Like... The Duke shifted, his expression changing to something warmer, more controlled. Lady Pemberton, how kind of you to think of me. I'd heard you were struggling to fill your social calendar these days. Perhaps we can catch up when you're less desperate for conversation. Eliza blinked. That's vicious. It's effective. She'll be too busy being insulted to continue her attack. The Duke stood, moving to the window. This is what you need to understand. They'll try to make you react, to cry, to rage, to show weakness. Every response is a weapon they'll use against you, so you respond with ice, with control. You make them feel small without ever raising your voice. I don't know if I can do that. You can, because the alternative is letting them win. He turned back to her. Again. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Eliza stood. All right, let's do it again. Be Lady Pemberton. Be worse this time. They spent the next 2 hours in brutal rehearsal. The Duke played every role. The sympathetic friend hiding judgment, the openly hostile matron, the man who'd try to proposition her because her ruined reputation made her seem available. Each scenario was worse than the last, each insult more cutting. Eliza stumbled at first, cried once, which earned a sharp rebuke from the Duke, but slowly, painfully she learned how to smile when she wanted to scream, how to deliver a verbal knife wound with perfect politeness, how to stand in the face of cruelty and not give an inch. By the time the Duke left, her jaw ached from clenching and her hands shook from adrenaline. But something had shifted. She felt harder, readier. One more thing, the Duke said at the door. When you see Winters tomorrow night, and you will see him, you do nothing. You don't speak to him. You don't look at him. He doesn't exist. That's it? I just ignore him? Trust me, nothing will infuriate him more than being irrelevant. The Duke's mouth curved. He destroyed you to prove his power. You erase him to prove he never had any. After he left, Eliza poured herself a brandy with trembling hands. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow night she'd walk back into the world that had destroyed her and dare it to try again. She finished the brandy and poured another. The dress arrived the next morning in a box tied with black ribbon. Eliza opened it alone in her bedroom, her heart hammering. The crimson silk spilled out like blood. It was even more beautiful than she remembered, and more terrifying. This wasn't a dress for blending in. This was a declaration of war. She spent the afternoon preparing with meticulous care. A bath. Hair arranged in a classical style that emphasized her bone structure. Minimal makeup, just enough to highlight her eyes and the sharp angles of her face that exile had created. When she finally stepped into the dress, it fit like it had been made for her body specifically, because it had. Every line, every curve designed to project strength and defiance. The ruby pendant settled against her collarbone, catching the lamplight. Eliza stared at her reflection and barely recognized herself. The woman in the mirror looked dangerous, A knock at the door made her turn. Her father stood in the hallway, his expression unreadable. "The carriage is ready," he said. They looked at each other for a long moment. "You look like your grandmother," he said finally. She had that same fire in her eyes. It terrified most men. "Did it terrify you?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yes, that's how I knew she was worth knowing." He paused. "Whatever you're planning tonight, be careful." It was the closest thing to approval she'd gotten from him in months. "I will," she said. They rode to Lady Morrison's townhouse in silence. Through the carriage window, Eliza watched London slide past. Elegant buildings, gas lamps just beginning to glow in the dusk, well-dressed people heading to various entertainments. Somewhere in this city, Christopher Winters was preparing for the same ball, confident, secure in his victory. He had no idea what was coming. The Morrison townhouse blazed with light and music. Carriages lined the street, disgorging aristocrats in their finest clothing. Eliza's stomach clenched as their carriage joined the queue. "Remember," her father said quietly, "you're a Harrington. We don't cower." "No," Eliza agreed. "We don't." The carriage door opened. A footman offered his hand. Eliza took it and stepped out into the cool evening air. The walk to the entrance felt endless. People turned to stare. She could feel their eyes like physical touches. Whispers erupted in her wake. "Is that? Can't believe she'd dare. Absolute gall." Eliza kept her chin up and her expression serene, as if she couldn't hear them, as if their opinions were beneath her notice. The receiving line was torture. Lady Morrison, a formidable woman in her 60s, looked at Eliza with barely concealed shock. "Lady Harrington," she said, her voice tight. "What a surprise." "Lady Morrison, thank you for the invitation." Eliza smiled pleasantly, as if the hostess hadn't been one of the loudest voices condemning her months ago. "I don't recall—" Lady Morrison started, then stopped as Lord Harrington stepped forward. "My daughter has been away," he said with quiet authority. "She's returned. I trust that won't be a problem." It was a statement, not a question. Lady Morrison's mouth thinned, but she nodded curtly. Eliza moved past her into the ballroom, and the full weight of society's judgment crashed over her. The room went quiet. Not completely. The orchestra still played, conversation still murmured, but there was a sudden hush, a collective intake of breath as 300 people registered her presence. Then the whispers started. Louder now. More vicious. Eliza felt every eye on her, felt the weight of their contempt, their curiosity, their savage delight at having new entertainment. She wanted to run. Instead, she walked, head high, spine straight, moving through the crowd like she owned every inch of the floor. The crimson dress swirled around her legs. The ruby caught the chandelier light. She looked like fire-made flesh. "Eliza?" The voice was tentative, familiar. Margaret Sutherland stood a few feet away, her face pale with shock. "Maggie," Eliza said evenly, "I didn't know you were— What are you doing here?" Margaret's eyes darted around nervously, clearly aware of the attention they were drawing. "The same thing everyone else is doing, attending a ball. But after everything, you can't just—" Margaret lowered her voice. "People are saying terrible things." "They've been saying terrible things for months. I'm done hiding from gossip." Eliza studied her former friend. "Unless you'd prefer I leave, I wouldn't want to damage your reputation by association." Margaret flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You abandoned me, Maggie. The moment things got difficult, you chose your safety over our friendship." Eliza felt the words cut even as she spoke them. "So forgive me if I'm not particularly interested in your concern now." "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do." "You could have believed me." "I wanted to, but the evidence was fabricated. All of it." Eliza stepped closer, keeping her voice low. "I was set up, Maggie, deliberately destroyed by people I trusted, and now I'm going to prove it." Margaret's eyes widened. "How?" Before Eliza could answer, a familiar voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Lady Harrington, what an unexpected pleasure." Christopher Winters. Eliza turned slowly. He stood 5 feet away, impeccably dressed in black evening wear, his handsome face arranged in an expression of polite surprise, as if her presence was mildly interesting, as if he hadn't destroyed her life. Every muscle in Eliza's body went rigid. The Duke's words echoed in her mind. "He doesn't exist." She turned away without speaking. "Surely you're not going to ignore me," Christopher said, his voice carrying just enough to draw more attention. "After all we once meant to each other." The crowd was watching openly now, sensing drama. Eliza forced herself to keep walking. 1 step, 2. Christopher moved to block her path. "I think we should speak," he said. His smile was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "Clear the air. I'd hate for there to be any lingering awkwardness between us." There's nothing to clear." Eliza met his gaze directly. "Please move." "Not until we've had a proper conversation." His hand reached for her arm. She pulled back sharply. "Don't touch me." The words rang through the ballroom. The orchestra faltered. Conversations died completely. Christopher's smile didn't waver, but something ugly flickered in his eyes. "I'm simply trying to be civil." "Civil?" Eliza felt fury rising hot and bright. She'd promised herself she wouldn't react, wouldn't give him the satisfaction, but standing here looking at his smug face, remembering everything he'd taken from her, control snapped. "You want to be civil?" Her voice carried across the silent ballroom. "After you stood in front of everyone we knew and called me a whore? After you destroyed my reputation with fabricated letters and lies? You want civility?" Christopher's expression shifted, just for a second, into something harder. "I spoke the truth. If you can't handle the consequences of your actions—" "What actions?" Eliza stepped closer, her voice shaking with rage. "I was faithful to you. I trusted you. I loved you. And you repaid that by orchestrating the most vicious, calculated character assassination I've ever witnessed. So no, Lord Winters, we will not have a civil conversation. We will have no conversation at all, because you don't deserve my words. You don't deserve my time. You don't even deserve my hatred." The ballroom was frozen. Every face turned toward them. Christopher's jaw tightened. "You're making a scene." "Good." Eliza felt reckless energy coursing through her. "Let them watch. Let them see exactly how much contempt I have for you." "You really think anyone here believes you?" Christopher's voice dropped, meant only for her ears. "You're already ruined, Eliza. This little display just proves you've lost your mind along with your reputation." "Perhaps. Or perhaps they're about to learn the truth about who you really are." Something flickered across Christopher's face, the first hint of uncertainty she'd seen. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out soon enough." Eliza stepped past him. "Enjoy the ball, Lord Winters. It might be your last pleasant evening for quite some time." She walked away on trembling legs, feeling his stare burning into her back. The crowd parted for her. Their expressions ranged from shock to fascination to poorly hidden glee. She'd given them exactly what they wanted: drama, conflict, entertainment. But she'd also done something else. She'd shown them she wasn't broken, wasn't afraid, and she'd rattled Christopher Winters. Eliza found a quiet alcove near the terrace doors and finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack a rib. She'd lost control, confronted Christopher directly, done exactly what the Duke told her not to do. That was either brilliant or catastrophic. The Duke's voice came from the shadows to her left. He emerged dressed in formal black, his expression unreadable. "I thought you said not to acknowledge him," Eliza said. "I did, and you ignored me spectacularly." The Duke studied her. "Though I'll admit, watching you eviscerate him in front of 300 witnesses was satisfying. He touched me, or tried to. I couldn't..." Eliza's voice cracked. "I couldn't just stand there and let him pretend to be the victim again." "No, I suppose you couldn't." The Duke moved closer. "The question now is whether this helps or hurts us." "What do you mean?" "You've made yourself the center of attention again, reminded everyone that the scandal exists. Some will see courage, but others will see exactly what Winters said: a woman unhinged by guilt and shame." The words hit like cold water. "So I've made things worse." "Not necessarily. Depends on what happens next." The Duke glanced back at the ballroom. "Winters is currently surrounded by sympathetic friends. playing the role of wounded gentleman forced to endure a madwoman's accusations. But he's also rattled. I could see it, which means he'll make mistakes. How do you know? Because I've spent 20 years studying how powerful men react when their control is threatened. The Duke's eyes glinted. He expected you to be meek, apologetic. Your defiance terrifies him more than he's willing to admit. Eliza leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. What do I do now? Now? You stay, you dance, you show everyone that you're not hiding in shame. He paused. And you let me handle the next move. Which is? Winters has a weakness, his gambling debts. I've been collecting information, who he owes, how much, how desperate he is. The Duke's voice went cold. Tomorrow, certain creditors will receive anonymous suggestions that Lord Winter's financial situation is more precarious than he's admitting, that his recent business ventures have failed, that he might not be able to pay what he owes. That will ruin him. Not ruin. Not yet. But it will apply pressure, make him panic, and panicked men make mistakes, Eliza finished. You've said that before. Because it's true. The Duke straightened. For now, survive the rest of this evening. Can you do that? Eliza thought about Christopher's face when she'd confronted him, the uncertainty beneath his anger. Yes, she said. I can do that. The Duke nodded and disappeared back into the shadows. Eliza took a deep breath and returned to the ballroom. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of hostile stares and whispered conversations. Eliza danced when asked, mostly with older gentlemen who seemed amused by the scandal. She spoke when spoken to, delivering the practiced responses the Duke had drilled into her. Lady Pemberton approached at one point, her face arranged in false sympathy. My dear, I simply must ask, are you quite well? That outburst with Lord Winters seemed so unlike you. Eliza smiled sweetly. How would you know what's like me, Lady Pemberton? We've never had a real conversation in our lives. Just polite lies masquerading as friendship. Lady Pemberton's mouth fell open. Eliza walked away before she could respond. Small victories. As midnight approached, Eliza prepared to leave. She'd survived, made her appearance, proven she wasn't cowering in the countryside. She was heading toward the exit when she saw Marcus Thorne. He stood near the refreshment table, wine glass in hand, talking to a group of men. He looked comfortable, confident, completely unbothered by the fact that he'd falsely confessed to an affair that destroyed her life. Something in Eliza snapped. She crossed the ballroom in 6 long strides, her crimson dress drawing every eye. Thorne looked up as she approached, his expression shifting to carefully manufactured concern. Lady Harrington. She threw her drink in his face. The wine arced through the air in perfect slow motion, splashing across Thorne's expensive jacket, dripping down his face. The ballroom went silent again. Thorne stood frozen, wine dripping from his chin, shock written across his features. That, Eliza said clearly, is for every lie you told about me, for the false confession, for destroying my life to help a coward settle a business deal. You're insane, Thorne hissed, wiping wine from his eyes. No, I'm finished being silent. Eliza stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. You think you won. You think you're safe. But I'm going to destroy you, Marcus, slowly, methodically, and when I'm done, you'll wish you'd never heard my name. She turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving chaos in her wake. The night air hit her like a slap. Eliza stood on the front steps, breathing hard, her hands shaking. She'd lost control again, spectacularly. Thrown wine in a man's face in front of London's elite. The Duke was going to kill her. Her father's carriage appeared, and she climbed in without waiting for assistance. As they pulled away, she saw the Duke standing in the Morrisons' doorway, watching her leave. His expression was absolutely unreadable. Eliza closed her eyes and waited for the consequences. They came faster than expected. By noon the next day, 3 major gossip columns had covered the ball. The headlines were vicious. Disgraced lady returns to make scene at Morrison Ball. Lady Harrington's violent outburst shocks society. Fallen woman proves critics right with unhinged display. Eliza read them all at breakfast, her coffee going cold in her cup. Her father sat across from her, his face carved from stone. What were you thinking? I wasn't, Eliza admitted. I just reacted. You've made yourself look unstable, vindictive, exactly what they said you were. Lord Harrington set down his newspaper with precise care. The Duke came by this morning. He was not pleased. I'm sure he wasn't. He wants to see you today, immediately. Eliza's stomach dropped. Where? His residence. A carriage is waiting. She went without argument. The Duke's London house was a fortress of grey stone and iron gates. Eliza was shown to a study that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Dark wood, heavy furniture, walls lined with books that probably cost more than most people's homes. The Duke stood by the fireplace, his back to her. You've made my job considerably more difficult, he said without turning. I know. I'm sorry. Are you? Now he turned, and his expression was colder than she'd ever seen it. Because from where I'm standing, you deliberately sabotaged our strategy. I told you to show control, grace under pressure. Instead, you screamed at Winters and assaulted Thorne. He destroyed my life, and you're supposed to destroy his systematically, with evidence, with precision. The Duke moved closer, not by confirming every terrible thing they've said about you. Eliza felt tears sting her eyes. I can't be perfect. I can't just stand there while they smile and lie and pretend. Then you can't win. The Duke's voice was brutal. This is war, Lady Harrington, and in war, discipline matters more than passion. You want revenge? Then you need to be cold, calculated, ruthless. Can you do that, or are you going to keep indulging your emotions like a child? The words struck like a physical blow. Get out, Eliza whispered. What? Get out. This arrangement is over. I don't need you. I don't need your cold calculations and your condescension and your... Her voice broke. I'm not your weapon. I'm a person. And maybe I can't be as heartless as you, but at least I'm not empty inside. The Duke went very still. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the study. Then something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like pain. You're right, he said quietly. I am empty. I've been empty for a very long time. That's what makes me effective. But it's also what makes me forget that not everyone can operate that way. He turned back to the fireplace, his shoulders tense. When I was 23, he said, his voice low, I was engaged to a woman I loved, truly loved. She was kind, bright, everything good in the world. He paused. My business rival at the time decided she was a useful target. He orchestrated a similar scheme to what Winters did to you. False letters, manufactured evidence, a very public destruction of her reputation. Eliza's breath caught. I tried to fight back, tried to prove her innocence, but I was young, reckless. I made emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. The Duke's hands clenched. She killed herself 2 months later. Couldn't live with the shame, the isolation, the loss of everything she'd been. The room went silent except for the crackling fire. So yes, the Duke continued, still not looking at her, I'm empty. Because I carved out everything that made me vulnerable, everything that could be used against me, and I've spent 20 years becoming the kind of man who can destroy his enemies without hesitation or mercy. He finally turned. But you're right. You're not a weapon, and I shouldn't treat you like one. Eliza stared at him, seeing him properly for the first time. Not as the cold, ruthless Duke, but as someone who'd been broken long before they'd met. I'm sorry, she said softly, about your fiancé. So am I. He moved to his desk, pulling out a folder. But her death taught me something important. Emotion without strategy is suicide. Strategy without emotion is pointless. He held out the folder. So let's find the balance. Your passion, my planning. Together. Eliza took the folder. Inside were documents, financial records, correspondence, witness statements. What is this? Proof, the Duke said. I found the forger who created the letters. He's willing to testify, for the right price. I've also uncovered evidence of Winters' gambling debts and his failed business ventures. And I've traced the money trail back to the original deal we made. He paused. We have enough to destroy them, but we need to deploy it correctly, strategically. How? There's a parliamentary session in 2 weeks. Winters is trying to secure a position on a trade committee. If we expose him there, publicly, with undeniable evidence, we don't just ruin his reputation, we end his career entirely. Eliza's pulse quickened. And Thorne? We'll fall with him. They're too interconnected to separate. The Duke's eyes met hers. But I need you to be patient. Can you do that? Eliza thought about the ballroom, about Christopher's uncertainty, Marcus's shock. What about what happened last night? She asked. The gossip columns say I'm unhinged. Let them. A ghost of a smile crossed the Duke's face. Actually, your outburst might work in our favor. Everyone now thinks you're emotionally unstable, driven mad by guilt, which means they won't see us coming when we strike. So I'm the distraction. You're the chaos that keeps them off balance while I position the killing blow. The Duke extended his hand. Partners? Eliza looked at his outstretched hand, at this damaged, brilliant, ruthless man who'd lost someone the same way she'd lost everything. She took his hand. Partners. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to maintain the fragile alliance, to survive society's contempt, to let the Duke work in the shadows while she remained visible and vulnerable. 2 weeks until they destroyed Christopher Winters and Marcus Thorne completely. Eliza left the Duke's residence with new purpose burning in her chest. The war wasn't over. It was just getting started. But 3 days later, everything changed. Eliza was reading in the drawing room when her father burst in, his face ashen. What happened? She demanded, standing. He handed her a newspaper with shaking hands. The headline made her blood run cold. Duke Adrian Blackmore, under investigation for fraud and financial manipulation. Eliza's hands trembled as she read. Anonymous accusations, claims of illegal business practices, suggestions that the Duke had been operating outside the law for years. No, she whispered. The article continued. The investigation was being led by a parliamentary committee, the same committee Christopher Winters was trying to join. He'd struck first. Somehow, Christopher had discovered their alliance, had learned the Duke was helping her, and now he was systematically destroying her only weapon. The folder fell from Eliza's nerveless fingers, papers scattering across the floor. They were going to lose. They were going to lose. The thought paralyzed Eliza for exactly 10 seconds. Then fury burned through the fear, white-hot and clarifying. No, she said aloud. Absolutely not. Her father was pacing the drawing room, his military bearing cracking under stress. This is a disaster. If the Duke is under investigation, any association with him will destroy what little credibility you have left. We need to distance ourselves immediately. We're not doing anything. Eliza grabbed the newspaper, scanning the article more carefully. This is Christopher's doing. He's trying to isolate me, remove my only ally. Then he's succeeding. Lord Harrington stopped pacing, his face flushed. Eliza, I've allowed this vendetta of yours because the Duke assured me he could control the situation, but now he's the one being investigated for fraud. Do you understand what that means? It means Christopher is scared. Eliza's mind raced. He wouldn't strike at the Duke unless he felt threatened, unless he knew we were close to exposing him. Or it means you've both underestimated Lord Winters. Her father's voice softened, becoming almost pleading. Please, end this before it destroys what's left of our family. Eliza looked at him. This man who'd exiled her without a fight, who'd believed the worst of her without question. Part of her wanted to scream at him, to demand the loyalty he'd never given. Instead, she said, I can't. Not now. Not when we're this close. Close to what? Mutual destruction? Close to the truth. She folded the newspaper with deliberate care. I need to see the Duke, now. He's probably in crisis meetings with his solicitors. Then I'll wait. Eliza headed for the door. I'm not abandoning him the way everyone abandoned me. Her father called after her, but she was already gone. The Duke's residence was in chaos when Eliza arrived. Servants rushed through hallways carrying documents and messages. Stern-faced men in legal attire clustered in the entrance hall, speaking in urgent whispers. The air thrummed with controlled panic. Lady Harrington! The Duke's head butler appeared, his usual composure fractured. His Grace is not receiving— I'm not asking. Eliza pushed past him, heading for the study. She found the Duke surrounded by 4 men in expensive suits, papers spread across every surface. He looked up as she entered, his expression flickering between surprise and irritation. "Gentlemen, give us a moment," he said. "Your Grace, we really should. Now." The lawyers filed out, shooting Eliza suspicious glances. When the door closed, the Duke leaned against his desk, his carefully maintained control visibly fraying. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Association with me right now is exactly where I need to be." Eliza crossed to him. "Tell me everything. What are they accusing you of?" The Duke laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Financial manipulation, bribery, using my position to illegally influence trade agreements." He gestured at the papers. "It's all fabricated, of course, but Winters did his homework. The accusations are just plausible enough to warrant investigation." "Who's leading it?" "A parliamentary committee. 3 members." His jaw tightened. "One of whom is Lord Ashford, Winters' father." Eliza's stomach dropped. "That's not a coincidence." "No, it's strategic brilliance." The Duke's voice dripped with grudging respect. "Winters learned we were working together, probably from your little scene at the Morrison Ball. So he moved first, created a scandal big enough to occupy all my time and resources. By the time I clear my name, if I can clear my name, the parliamentary session will be over. His position will be secure, and any evidence we present will look like desperate retaliation from a disgraced duke and his unstable ally." The cage was perfect. Christopher had trapped them both. "There has to be a way out," Eliza said. "If there is, I haven't found it." The Duke pushed away from the desk, moving to the window. "I've spent the last 6 hours with the best legal minds in London. They're all saying the same thing. This investigation will take months, maybe years. I can't move against Winters while defending myself." "So we're just giving up?" "I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic." He turned to face her, and for the first time since they'd met, he looked genuinely defeated. "You should distance yourself from me, publicly denounce our association, say I manipulated you, used your situation for my own purposes. It might salvage—" "Stop!" Eliza's voice cut through the study like a blade. "I'm not doing that." "Then you're a fool." "Probably. But I'm not a coward." She moved closer, her mind working frantically. "Christopher expects us to panic, to retreat, to fight his accusations on his terms." "What other terms are there?" "Ours." The idea crystallized even as she spoke it. "We don't fight the investigation. We ignore it. We move forward with our original plan. Expose Christopher at the parliamentary session. Force him to defend himself while you're under scrutiny." The Duke stared at her. "That's insane. I'll have no credibility. Anything I present will be dismissed as the desperate lies of a man trying to deflect from his own crimes." "Exactly, which is why you won't be the one presenting it." Eliza felt the pieces falling into place. "I will." Silence crashed through the study. "You," the Duke said slowly, "are suggesting that a disgraced woman with a destroyed reputation should stand before Parliament and accuse one of their rising stars of fraud and conspiracy." "Yes." "They'll laugh you out of the chamber." "Maybe. Or maybe they'll listen." Eliza's pulse hammered. "I have nothing left to lose. My reputation is already ruined. I've been called every vile name imaginable. But that also means I have no reason to lie. No political ambitions to protect. No social standing to preserve." The Duke's expression shifted, calculation replacing defeat. "You'd be completely vulnerable. If this fails, I'm exactly where I already am. Exiled, disgraced, forgotten." She held his gaze. "But if it works, we destroy Christopher. And you get your revenge while I get my life back." "It's a terrible plan." "It's the only plan we have." The Duke was quiet for a long moment, his brilliant mind clearly working through scenarios, probabilities, risks. Finally, he said, "We'd need irrefutable evidence. The forger's testimony won't be enough, not coming from you. We'd need the original forged letters, financial records proving the conspiracy, witnesses beyond just the man who created the forgeries. Can we get that? In 2 weeks?" The Duke's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It would require resources, connections, and a level of investigative skill that—" He stopped. "Actually, yes. We might be able to. How? I've been approaching this as a legal problem, gathering evidence for courts and committees. His eyes lit with the first spark of hope she'd seen all day. But you're right. We're not fighting this on their terms anymore. We're going public, which means we need a different kind of proof. He crossed to his desk, pulling out a locked drawer and removing a thick folder. What is that? Eliza asked. Everything I've collected on Winters and Thorne. Financial irregularities. Failed ventures. Suspicious transactions. He spread the papers across the desk. Individually, none of this proves conspiracy, but together, it paints a picture. We just need a few more pieces to make it undeniable. Like what? Like testimony from someone inside their operation, someone who knows the truth and is willing to speak it. The Duke tapped one document. Winters has a personal secretary, a man named Edward Finch, who's worked for him for 5 years. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, it's him. Will he talk to us? Not willingly, but everyone has pressure points. The Duke's expression hardened. Finch has a sister. She's in debt, gambling, like Winters, about to lose everything. If we offer to clear her debts in exchange for his testimony, that's blackmail. It's leverage, there's a difference. Eliza thought about the past months, the cruelty she'd endured, the systematic destruction of everything she'd valued. Do it, she said. The Duke nodded. I'll send someone to approach him tonight. Discreet, deniable. If he agrees, we'll have our inside witness. He began gathering the papers. But that still leaves the physical evidence. The forged letters themselves. Winters must have the originals somewhere. He'd never destroy proof of his own cleverness. Where would he keep them? His London residence, most likely. He's arrogant enough to think himself untouchable. The Duke paused. We'd need to search it. Thoroughly. How? We can't exactly walk in and demand access. No, but there are other ways. The Duke's eyes met hers. Winters is hosting a dinner party in 3 days. A celebration of his impending appointment to the Trade Committee. Half of Parliament will be there. He'd never invite me. He wouldn't, but he will invite your father. The Duke leaned forward. Lord Harrington still has social standing. If he attends, and you accompany him as his daughter, attempting reconciliation with society, no one will question it too closely. My father would never agree to He will if I make it clear that his financial survival depends on it. The Duke's voice went cold. I told you before. I hold his mortgages, his mining shares. I can ruin him with a word. He'll cooperate. Eliza felt a flash of sympathy for her father, followed immediately by harder calculation. And while everyone's at dinner, you search the house. Not me. I'll be too visible. My movements are being watched because of the investigation. The Duke paused. But I have people who specialize in this sort of thing. Professionals. They'll find the letters if they exist. And if they don't? Then we rely on Finch's testimony and the financial records and your testimony about what happened the night of the ball. The Duke's gaze was steady. It won't be perfect, but it might be enough. Eliza absorbed this. 3 days to prepare, 2 weeks to execution, everything riding on stolen letters and coerced testimony, and her ability to stand before the most powerful men in England and make them believe her. I'll need help, she said, with the presentation, how to speak to Parliament, what to say, how to say it. I'll coach you, every day until the session. The Duke began organizing the papers. We'll rehearse until you can deliver this in your sleep, until every argument is airtight and every piece of evidence is perfectly placed. What about the investigation into you? I'll let my lawyers handle the preliminary responses, delay tactics, procedural objections. He glanced up. With luck, this will all be over before they get anywhere meaningful. And once Winters is exposed, the investigation will collapse. It's built entirely on his testimony and manufactured evidence. And if it doesn't collapse? The Duke's expression was grim. Then I'll spend the next 5 years in legal battles proving my innocence. But at least you'll be free. And Winters will be destroyed. That's worth something. It was the closest thing to selflessness she'd heard from him. Thank you, Eliza said quietly. Don't thank me yet. This plan has approximately 100 ways to fail. The Duke extended his hand. But we're committed now. Partners until the end. Eliza shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip. until the end. The next 3 days passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Eliza spent mornings with the Duke, rehearsing her presentation. He was a brutal teacher, interrupting her constantly, demanding precision, forcing her to anticipate every possible objection. "They'll say you're lying," he'd announced suddenly, "that you fabricated this story to salvage your reputation. How do you respond?" "I present the financial records showing the payment from the Duke to Winters." "Wrong. You never mention money first. Money is abstract. Start with the forger's testimony. Make it personal, human, then layer in the financial proof as confirmation." They'd run through it again and again, until Eliza could navigate the presentation blindfolded. Afternoons were spent with the Duke's investigators, going over every piece of evidence, learning the timeline, memorizing names, dates, transaction amounts, building an encyclopedic knowledge of the conspiracy. "The payment was made on August 12th, one investigator would say. £30,000 transferred through 2 intermediary accounts to obscure the source. Can you explain the routing?" Eliza would recite the account numbers, the banks, the purpose of each transfer, over and over until it became second nature. Evenings brought a different kind of preparation. The Duke insisted she maintain her social presence, attending small gatherings, being seen in public, reminding London that she wasn't hiding. "They need to see you as confident," he'd explained, "not desperate. When you stand before Parliament, they need to recognize the woman who's been walking through society with her head high despite their contempt." So Eliza attended dinners where people whispered behind their hands, went to the theater where former friends refused to acknowledge her, walked through parks where mothers pulled their daughters away as she passed. Each insult hardened her resolve. On the third night, her father came to her room after dinner. He looked older than she'd ever seen him, gray and worn, the weight of his choices visible in every line of his face. "The Duke spoke to me," he said without preamble, "about the dinner party, about what you're planning. And I'll do it. I'll attend with you." He sat heavily in the chair by her window. "But I need to know, is this about justice or revenge?" Eliza considered the question. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Her father's voice was quiet. "I've spent months believing the worst of you, exiling you to protect our family name, and I was wrong. The Duke showed me evidence, enough to convince me that you were telling the truth all along." Tears pricked Eliza's eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "Why didn't you believe me then?" "Because I was a coward. Because protecting our reputation seemed more important than protecting my daughter." He looked at her directly. "I failed you, Eliza, completely. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I'm with you now, whatever you need, however this ends." It wasn't enough. Years of love and trust couldn't be rebuilt with one conversation, but it was something. "I need you to be convincing," Eliza said. "At the dinner, Christopher and Marcus can't suspect anything. I'll be charming, conciliatory, the aging lord trying to rebuild bridges for his wayward daughter." Her father's mouth twisted. "It won't even be acting. That's what I've become." "Then use it." Eliza moved to the window, looking out at London's lights. 3 days from now, we walk into Christopher Winters' house. We smile, we play our parts, and while everyone's distracted, we steal back everything he took from us. Her father stood, moving beside her. "And if this doesn't work, if the letters aren't there, or the testimony falls apart, or Parliament refuses to listen, then at least I'll know I fought back, that I didn't just accept what they did to me." Eliza's reflection stared back at her from the dark window. "That has to count for something." Her father squeezed her shoulder briefly, an awkward gesture, but genuine. Then he left without another word. Eliza stood alone in the darkness, feeling the weight of what was coming. 3 days. The dinner party was exactly what Eliza expected, ostentatious, self-congratulatory, and filled with people who'd happily watched her destruction. Christopher's London residence was a monument to new wealth: marble floors, gilt-edged mirrors, artwork purchased for price rather than beauty. Everything calculated to impress, to intimidate. Eliza entered on her father's arm, wearing deep blue silk that made her look regal rather than apologetic. The entrance hall went quiet as they were announced. Lord Harrington and Lady Eliza Harrington. Whispers erupted immediately. Eliza kept her expression serene, scanning the crowd. Christopher stood near the drawing room entrance, his face carefully neutral. But she saw the flash of surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to come. Lady Harrington. Christopher approached with his host's smile firmly in place. What an unexpected pleasure. Lord Winters, Eliza's voice was cool. Thank you for allowing us to attend. My father and I are trying to mend fences, rejoin society on more positive terms. It was a humiliating lie, designed to make Christopher feel safe, victorious. She watched him process it, saw satisfaction flicker across his features. Of course, water under the bridge. He turned to her father with false warmth. Edmund, good to see you. Come, there are some gentlemen I'd like you to meet. Trade committee prospects. Her father followed Christopher into the crowd, playing his role perfectly. Eliza found herself alone, surrounded by hostile faces. Brave of you to show up here. Margaret Sutherland appeared at her elbow, her voice tentative. After everything. Or foolish, Eliza replied. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Eliza, I've been thinking about what you said at the Morrison ball, about being set up. Margaret glanced around nervously. I want to believe you, but the evidence was fabricated, all of it. Eliza kept her voice low. And soon everyone will know the truth. You'll just have to decide if you believe it when it comes out. Before Margaret could respond, a servant announced dinner. The meal was interminable. Eliza sat between two elderly lords who ignored her completely, discussing politics as if she were furniture. Across the table, Christopher held court, confident and charismatic. Marcus Thorne sat beside him, laughing at his jokes, playing the loyal friend. They looked untouchable. Eliza forced herself to eat, to smile blandly when someone glanced her way, to play the role of chastened woman seeking redemption. While somewhere in this house, the Duke's people were searching. Dessert arrived, wine flowed, the dinner party fragmented into smaller conversations, groups drifting between rooms. Eliza excused herself, claiming need of the ladies' retiring room. In the hallway, she found a servant, young, nervous, with the Duke's signet ring tucked in his pocket where only she could see it. Well, she whispered. Third floor, master bedroom, locked safe behind a painting. The young man's eyes darted around. We found them, letters, contracts, everything, but we can't remove them without being noticed. Eliza's heart hammered. Can you photograph them? Already done. Miniature camera. We'll develop the plates tonight. Then leave everything exactly as you found it. Eliza's mind raced. He can't know we were here. The servant nodded and disappeared down a side corridor. Eliza returned to the party, her pulse thundering in her ears. They had it. Physical proof. Christopher's own arrogance, keeping the evidence of his crime like a trophy, had just destroyed him. She found her father in the drawing room, deep in conversation with Lord Ashford. Christopher's father looked exactly like his son would in 30 years, handsome, entitled, utterly certain of his place in the world. Ah, Lady Harrington. Lord Ashford's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your father and I were just discussing your situation. He says you're attempting to move past recent unpleasantness. I'm trying, Lord Ashford. Eliza arranged her features into something appropriately humble, though I understand it will take time to rebuild trust. Indeed, actions have consequences, my dear. Society has long memories. The condescension in his voice made her want to scream. Instead, she smiled. I'm learning that lesson very thoroughly, sir. Good. Perhaps in a few years, once the scandal has properly faded, you might find some country gentleman willing to overlook your past. He patted her arm like she was a child. Though I'd advise setting your expectations accordingly. Eliza maintained her smile through sheer force of will. Wise advice. Thank you. She excused herself before she said something that would ruin everything. The carriage ride home was silent. Eliza's hands trembled in her lap, adrenaline and fury fighting for dominance. That was one of the more degrading evenings of my life, her father said finally, and I've sat through parliamentary budget meetings. Despite everything, Eliza almost laughed. Thank you for enduring it. Did they find what they needed? Yes. The single word carried enormous weight. We have everything. Photographs of the forged letters, the contracts, all of it. Her father let out a long breath. Then it's really happening. You're really going to do this. In 11 days, at the parliamentary session. Eliza looked at him. I'll need you there, for support, if nothing else. I'll be there. He paused. Your mother has been asking about you. She's struggling with what she believed versus what she's learning now. She can struggle with it on her own time. Eliza, she called me a whore, father. She believed I was stupid enough to get caught having an affair, but never once considered I might be innocent. Eliza's voice hardened. Whatever guilt she's feeling now doesn't erase what she said, what she believed. Her father didn't argue. They rode the rest of the way in silence. The next week was a blur of preparation. The Duke's people developed the photographs, perfect, damning images of the forged letters in Christopher's own handwriting on the margins, proving his involvement. Edward Finch, the secretary, agreed to testify after his sister's debts were cleared. The forger himself provided a signed affidavit detailing exactly how he'd been hired and what he'd created. Every piece fell into place. Eliza rehearsed her presentation until she could recite it in her sleep. The Duke coached her on tone, pacing, emphasis, where to pause for effect, which documents to present in which order, how to handle hostile questions. They'll try to rattle you, he said during one late-night session, interrupt you, question your motives, make you defensive. I know. Knowing it and handling it are different things. The Duke leaned forward. When they attack, and they will attack, you don't defend yourself. You redirect to the evidence, every single time. Make it about the proof, not about your feelings. Even when they call me a liar? Especially then. His voice was firm. Your emotions are a weapon they'll use against you. Don't give it to them. Eliza nodded, filing the advice away with everything else. 3 days before the parliamentary session, the Duke's investigation suddenly escalated. New accusations emerged. Witnesses appeared, clearly coached, obviously false. The pressure intensified. They're trying to break you before the session, Eliza said, watching the Duke read the latest legal document with barely contained fury. They're succeeding. He threw the papers down. My solicitors are advising a plea agreement. Admit to minor infractions in exchange for dropping the major charges. You can't do that. I can't afford not to. If this goes to trial, I'll be tied up for years, bankrupt from legal fees. Even if I win, my reputation will never recover. 3 days, Eliza said urgently. Just hold on for 3 more days. Once Christopher falls, this entire investigation collapses with him. And if he doesn't fall? He will. She grabbed the Duke's hands, forcing him to look at her. I will make sure he falls, I promise you. The Duke searched her face, looking for something. Finally, he nodded. 3 days. Then I either clear my name or lose everything. We both do, Eliza said quietly. The night before the parliamentary session, Eliza couldn't sleep. She paced her bedroom, reviewing the presentation in her mind, anticipating questions, preparing responses. A knock at her door made her jump. Her mother stood in the hallway, her face pale in the lamplight. May I come in? Lady Catherine asked. Eliza wanted to say no, wanted to shut the door and shut out the woman who'd believed the worst of her without question, but something in her mother's expression, genuine fear maybe, or regret, made her step aside. Catherine entered slowly, looking around the room like she'd never seen it before. I've been a terrible mother, she said without preamble. I should have fought for you, believed you, protected you. Instead, I protected myself and our reputation. Yes, Eliza agreed. You should have. I can't change what I did. Can't undo the damage. Catherine's voice cracked. But I need you to know I believe you now. Your father showed me the evidence, explained what really happened, and I am so sorry. Tears tracked down her mother's face. Eliza felt her own eyes burning, but refused to let them fall. Tomorrow, Catherine continued, you're going to stand before Parliament and expose the men who destroyed you. It's going to be dangerous. They'll come after you with everything they have. I know. Let me help. Her mother moved closer. I know people. Influential women. I can make sure they're in the gallery tomorrow. Make sure they hear your testimony. Society matrons carry weight. If they believe you, others will follow. It was a small thing, But in the intricate web of social politics, it mattered. Why? Eliza asked. Why help now? Because I failed you once. I won't fail you again. Catherine reached out hesitantly, then pulled her hand back. You don't have to forgive me, but please, let me do this one thing. Eliza thought about the months of silence, the exile, the abandonment. Then she thought about tomorrow, about standing alone before hostile men who'd already decided she was worthless. All right, she said, call in your favors, get them there. Relief flooded her mother's face. Thank you. After she left, Eliza finally allowed herself to cry, not from sadness or fear, but from the strange, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, some things could be rebuilt. The morning of the parliamentary session dawned cold and bright. Eliza dressed in charcoal gray, sober, serious, unadorned, except for her grandmother's pearls. She pulled her hair back severely, applied minimal makeup. She needed to look credible, not decorative. The Duke arrived at 9, accompanied by 2 assistants carrying boxes of evidence. Ready? He asked. No, Eliza admitted, but I'm going anyway. They rode to Parliament in tense silence. The building loomed ahead, all gray stone and imposing columns, designed to make citizens feel small. Eliza refused to feel small. Inside, the gallery was filling with spectators. Eliza scanned the crowd and felt a jolt of surprise. Her mother had delivered. Dozens of society women sat in the front rows, their faces curious and attentive. Margaret Sutherland was there too, looking nervous but present. The Duke's hand touched her elbow briefly. They're starting. The parliamentary chamber was arranged in tiers, members seated in semicircles facing a central podium. Christopher Winters sat in the second row, looking confident and relaxed. Lord Ashford sat with the committee overseeing the Duke's investigation, his expression smug. We call Lady Eliza Harrington to present testimony regarding allegations of defamation and conspiracy. Eliza stood. Her legs felt like water. She walked to the podium on pure willpower, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone must hear it. 300 faces stared at her, skeptical, hostile, bored. She gripped the podium and began. Gentlemen, my name is Lady Eliza Harrington. 6 months ago, my reputation was destroyed by a deliberately fabricated scandal. I was accused of adultery based on forged letters and false testimony. Today, I'm here to present irrefutable proof of that conspiracy and to name the men responsible. The chamber stirred. Christopher's expression flickered. Eliza continued, her voice growing stronger. The man who orchestrated my destruction is Lord Christopher Winters. His accomplice was Lord Marcus Thorne. Their motive was financial gain facilitated through a business arrangement with Duke Adrian Blackmore. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Duke sat motionless, his face unreadable. I have testimony from the forger who created the false letters. Eliza held up the affidavit. I have financial records proving the payment structure of the conspiracy. I have photographic evidence of the original forged documents, kept by Lord Winters himself as proof of his own cleverness. And I have testimony from Lord Winters' personal secretary, who will confirm every detail of this conspiracy. The murmurs became shouts. Christopher was on his feet. This is absurd! The desperate lies of a disgraced woman trying to salvage. Then explain these. Eliza's assistant began distributing copies of the photographs. These are images of the forged letters found in your safe 3 days ago. Note the margins. Your handwriting, Lord Winters. Your notes about how to deploy them for maximum effect. Christopher's face went white. The chamber exploded into chaos. Members shouted questions. The gallery erupted in shocked whispers. Lord Ashford was demanding order, but no one was listening. Eliza stood at the podium, watching Christopher's carefully constructed world shatter in real time. And for the first time in 6 months, she smiled. The chaos in the parliamentary chamber reached a fever pitch. Men shouted over each other, demanding explanations, calling for order, pointing fingers. In the gallery, society women leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide with shock and fascination. Christopher remained standing, his face cycling through emotions too quickly to mask. Shock, fury, calculation, fear. He opened his mouth to speak, but Lord Pemberton cut him off. These are serious accusations, Lady Harrington. Pemberton was an older member, known for fairness. You're claiming Lord Winters deliberately destroyed your reputation as part of a business conspiracy? I'm not claiming it, sir. I'm proving it. Eliza's voice carried across the chamber with surprising strength. The evidence is in your hands, the forger's testimony, the financial records, the photographs. And I have one more witness, someone who was inside the conspiracy from the beginning. She nodded to the Duke's assistant, who opened the chamber door. Edward Finch entered, looking terrified but determined. Christopher's personal secretary, the man who'd arranged meetings, delivered messages, kept schedules, the man who knew everything. Mr. Finch, Eliza said clearly, please tell the chamber what you told me about the events of last August. Finch's voice shook, but his words were clear. Lord Winters instructed me to hire a forger, said he needed letters that would look like they'd been written by Lady Harrington. Love letters to Lord Thorne, explicit enough to be scandalous. Why did he need these letters? Eliza asked. He said it was the only way to end their engagement without legal complications. That he'd made arrangements with Duke Blackmore for a business venture, but the Duke had conditions. One was that Lord Winters couldn't be tied to the Harrington fortune through marriage. The chamber erupted again. This time, all eyes turned to the Duke. He stood slowly, his expression carved from ice. Mr. Finch is correct. I made Lord Winters an offer, significant capital for a shipping venture, contingent on him dissolving his engagement to Lady Harrington. I assumed he would do so honestly. I was wrong. You enabled this? Someone shouted from the back. You're complicit. I am, the Duke agreed coldly, which is why I've spent the last 3 months gathering evidence to destroy the men who used my offer as justification for their cruelty. I made a business arrangement. They chose to execute it through character assassination and fraud. Those are very different crimes. Lord Ashford was on his feet, his face purple with rage. This is a coordinated attack. My son is being slandered by a disgraced woman and a duke under investigation for crimes your son invented, the Duke interrupted. The investigation into my finances, based entirely on testimony and evidence provided by Lord Winters and Lord Thorne, fabricated just like the letters they created to destroy Lady Harrington. I have documentation proving it. He gestured to his assistant, who began distributing another set of papers. These are communications between your son and various witnesses in my investigation, the Duke continued. Payments made, testimony scripted. It's all there. Lord Winters tried to neutralize me the same way he neutralized Lady Harrington, by destroying my credibility before I could expose him. The chamber descended into complete pandemonium. Christopher finally found his voice. This is absurd. You're all believing the word of a woman scorned and a duke desperate to save himself. We're believing documented evidence, Lord Pemberton cut in sharply. Letters with your handwriting in the margins, Mr. Winters. Financial transactions in your name. Testimony from your own secretary. He looked at Christopher with something like disgust. Did you or did you not orchestrate Lady Harrington's public humiliation? Christopher's throat worked. She was having an affair. I had proof. Proof you manufactured, Eliza said quietly. Proof you created specifically to justify ending our engagement while keeping your honor intact. And it worked, didn't it? Society believed you. They called me terrible names, exiled me, destroyed me, all so you could make a business deal. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the debts, the expectations. So you destroyed an innocent woman rather than admit you had financial problems. Lord Pemberton's voice was scathing. Rather than end the engagement honestly and face social consequences yourself? Christopher looked around the chamber, clearly searching for allies. He found none. Even his father sat silent, his face ashen. Lord Thorne, Pemberton called out. You confessed to this alleged affair publicly. Was that confession true? Marcus Thorne sat frozen in his seat, looking like he wanted to disappear through the floor. When he didn't answer immediately, Pemberton's voice hardened. Lord Thorne, answer the question. It was... Marcus swallowed hard. It was part of the arrangement. Christopher said we needed to make it believable, that if I confessed, no one would question the truth of it. So you lied, publicly, destroyed a woman's reputation with a deliberate falsehood. I didn't think... Marcus stopped, seeming to realize anything he said would only make things worse. No, Eliza said, her voice cutting through the chamber. You didn't think. Neither of you thought about what it would do to me, how it would feel to stand in that ballroom while you called me a whore in front of everyone I knew, how it would feel to watch my own family turn against me, to spend months in exile, believing I'd never get my life back. Her voice broke slightly. She didn't try to hide it. You didn't think because you didn't care. I was just an obstacle, a problem to be solved, and you solved me the most vicious way possible. Silence fell across the chamber. Even the gallery had gone quiet. But you made a mistake, Eliza continued, her voice strengthening. You kept proof of what you'd done, because you were proud of it, because you thought you were untouchable, and that arrogance is what destroyed you. She looked directly at Christopher. You're not untouchable. You're just a coward who couldn't admit his own failures. Christopher's face contorted. For a moment, Eliza thought he might lunge at her. Instead, he turned and fled the chamber, pushing past other members in his desperation to escape. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the stunned silence. Lord Pemberton cleared his throat. I believe we've heard sufficient testimony. This matter will require formal investigation, but based on the evidence presented, I'm recommending immediate censure of Lord Winters and Lord Thorne, pending full inquiry. He looked at Eliza. Lady Harrington, on behalf of this body, I apologize. You were grievously wronged. I hope some measure of justice can be achieved. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Thank you, sir, Eliza managed. The session dissolved into procedural discussions. Eliza barely heard them. She stood at the podium, her legs suddenly weak, the full weight of what she'd just done crashing over her. She'd won. The Duke appeared at her elbow, his hand steady on her arm. Come on, let's get you out of here before the vultures descend. He guided her through a side door away from the chaos. In a small antechamber, Eliza finally let herself collapse into a chair. Did that really just happen? She whispered. It did. The Duke poured her water from a pitcher on the side table. You were magnificent, absolutely ruthless. I felt like I was going to faint. But you didn't, that's what matters. He handed her the glass. They believed you. More importantly, they believed the evidence. Winters is finished. So is Thorne. And you? Eliza looked up at him. The investigation? Will collapse within a week. Every witness against me was connected to Winters. Once that comes out, the entire case falls apart. The Duke's expression softened slightly. You saved me. You know that, right? If you hadn't stood up there and fought, we saved each other, Eliza interrupted. You gave me the tools. I just used them. A knock at the door made them both turn. Lord Harrington entered, his face streaked with tears. Eliza. He crossed the room quickly, pulling her into an awkward embrace. I'm so proud of you, so incredibly proud. Eliza stiffened, then slowly relaxed into her father's arms. Thank you for being here. I should have been here 6 months ago. Should have fought for you then. He pulled back, gripping her shoulders. But I'm here now, and I'll spend the rest of my life making up for my failure. Before Eliza could respond, the door burst open again. Her mother rushed in, followed by Margaret Sutherland and a cluster of society women. Eliza, everyone's talking about it. Margaret's eyes were wide. They're saying Christopher is going to be expelled from Parliament, that the Winters family is ruined. Good, Eliza said flatly. Lady Catherine pushed through the crowd, her face drawn. The ladies in the gallery are asking to speak with you. They want to apologize, publicly. I don't need their apologies. Perhaps not, but they need to give them. Her mother's voice was firm. You changed minds today, Eliza. Showed them what courage looks like. Don't deny them the chance to make amends. Eliza looked at the women crowding the doorway, society matrons who'd whispered about her, cut her in public, believed the worst without question. 5 minutes, she said. That's all. They filed in, these powerful women who controlled London's social hierarchy through whispers and invitations and carefully placed words. Lady Pemberton was among them, looking genuinely ashamed. Lady Harrington, she began, we owe you an enormous apology. We believed lies. We judged you without evidence. We were cruel. Yes, Eliza agreed. You were. Lady Pemberton flinched but continued. We'd like to make amends. Host a reception in your honor. Make it clear to all of society that you were wronged and that we were wrong to condemn you. Why? Eliza studied them. Because you feel guilty? Or because you're afraid I'll hold grudges? Both, probably, Lady Morrison admitted. But also because what happened to you could happen to any of our daughters. Any woman, really. One lie, one accusation, and we're ruined. You proved it's possible to fight back. That matters. Eliza felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement that her pain had purpose beyond personal vindication. All right, she said, plan your reception, but I have conditions. Name them. First, I want public retractions from every gossip column that called me a whore. Second, I want Christopher Winters and Marcus Thorne blacklisted from every respectable home in London. Third, she paused. I want a fund established for women whose reputations have been destroyed by lies. Legal support, financial assistance, a way to fight back. The women exchanged glances. Lady Pemberton nodded slowly. It shall be done, all of it. Then we have an understanding. After they left, Eliza sank back into her chair, exhausted. The Duke was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked. You're remarkable, he said quietly. You could have just accepted their apologies. Moved on. But you turned your suffering into something that will help others. Someone should benefit from this nightmare, Eliza replied. Might as well be women who need it. The Duke smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. For what it's worth, I think you're going to change things, actually make society better. From the man who manipulates society for profit, that's quite the compliment. I'm retiring from manipulation, the Duke said. After this, I think I'll focus on more honest pursuits. Such as? Haven't decided yet. Maybe I'll write a book. Confessions of a Reformed Bastard. He paused. Or perhaps I'll find someone to keep me honest. Someone fearless and brilliant who doesn't tolerate nonsense. Eliza looked at him sharply. Are you propositioning you? No, not yet. The Duke's eyes held hers. You've just reclaimed your life. The last thing you need is another man trying to control it. But eventually, when you've had time to heal and rebuild, he smiled. I'd very much like to properly court you, if you'd allow it. Eliza's breath caught. She'd expected many things from this day. A proposal from the Duke of Blackmore wasn't one of them. You're serious? Entirely. Though I understand if the answer is no, I did enable your destruction after all. You did, Eliza agreed, but you also helped me rise from it. That counts for something. She studied his face, the sharp intelligence, the carefully hidden vulnerability. Ask me again in 6 months, when we've both figured out who we are outside of revenge plots and conspiracies. 6 months, the Duke said. I can wait that long. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Raised voices, running footsteps. The door burst open and one of the Duke's assistants appeared, breathless. Your Grace, Lord Winters has been arrested. Fraud charges, they're taking him now. Eliza stood quickly. Where? The main entrance. There's a crowd. She was moving before he finished speaking, the Duke right behind her. They pushed through hallways crowded with parliamentary members and spectators, all rushing toward the entrance. Outside, a police wagon waited. Christopher Winters stood beside it in handcuffs, his face blank with shock. Lord Ashford stood nearby, arguing furiously with the arresting officers, but they ignored him. The crowd fell silent as Eliza appeared at the top of the steps. Christopher looked up. Their eyes met across the distance. Eliza descended slowly, each step deliberate. She stopped 3 feet from him, close enough to see the defeat in his eyes, the dawning realization of how completely he'd lost. You destroyed me for money, she said quietly, her voice carrying in the silence. I destroyed you for truth. Do you understand the difference? Christopher's jaw tightened. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Eliza stepped closer. You'll be tried for fraud, stripped of your position, of your family name will be tainted for generations. Every door that was open to you will slam shut. You'll know exactly what you did to me. I had no choice. You don't understand the pressure. You had every choice. You could have ended our engagement honestly, taken responsibility for your debts. Instead, you chose cruelty. Eliza's voice hardened. You thought destroying me would make you powerful, but it just proved you were weak. The officers began loading Christopher into the wagon. He looked back one last time, his expression desperate. Eliza, please, we were going to be married. That has to mean something. It did mean something. Once. She felt the words settle in her chest, final and true. But you killed it the night you stood in front of everyone we knew and called me a liar. Whatever we had, whatever we might have been, you destroyed it yourself. The wagon door slammed shut. Through the barred window, Christopher stared at her, and Eliza saw the exact moment he understood. It was really over. He'd really lost everything. The wagon pulled away. The crowd began to disperse, already gossiping about what they'd witnessed. Eliza stood on the steps of Parliament, watching London's elite chatter and point and begin the process of rewriting history. Soon they'd claim they'd always suspected Christopher, had never really believed the accusations against her, had been waiting for the truth to emerge. She didn't care what they said anymore. Lady Harrington, a reporter appeared, notepad in hand. The London Times would love an exclusive interview. Your story is not for sale, Eliza interrupted, but I'll give you a statement. The reporter's eyes lit up. Please. Eliza thought for a moment, choosing her words carefully. For months, I believed my life was over. That reputation once lost could never be reclaimed. But I learned something important. Truth is more powerful than lies. It just takes longer to emerge. She paused. To any woman facing false accusations, facing ruin through no fault of her own, fight back. Gather evidence. Find allies. Don't accept destruction quietly. You're stronger than you know. The reporter scribbled frantically. And Lord Winters? Any message for him? I hope he learns from this, becomes someone better than the man he was. Eliza smiled coldly. But I doubt he will. Some people never change. She turned and walked back up the steps, the Duke falling into step beside her. That was generous, he remarked, hoping he learns from this. I lied. I hope he suffers. Eliza glanced at him. But it sounded better for the papers. The Duke laughed, a genuine sound of delight. There's hope for you yet. The next weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of social rehabilitation. Lady Pemberton's promised reception became the event of the season. Invitations were fought over. Gossip columns gushed about Eliza's courage. Society women competed to be seen supporting her. It was overwhelming and exhausting and occasionally absurd. They're acting like I'm a hero, Eliza complained to Margaret over tea one afternoon. They were in the Harrington drawing room, surrounded by flowers and cards from well-wishers. 6 months ago, these same women wouldn't speak to me. They feel guilty, Margaret said, and they're right to. We all failed you. She set down her cup. I failed you worst of all. You were my friend, and I abandoned you when you needed me most. You were scared. That's not an excuse. Margaret's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I should have been braver, should have believed you. Can you forgive me? Eliza considered the question seriously. Margaret had hurt her, had chosen safety over loyalty. But she'd also come to Parliament, had sat in the gallery, visible and present, when it would have been easier to stay away. I'm working on it, Eliza said honestly. It's not instant, but I think we can rebuild something. Eventually. I'll take eventually, Margaret smiled shakily. That's more than I deserve. The door opened and Lady Catherine entered, followed by servants carrying more flowers. Where do you want these? Her mother asked. We're running out of space. Burn them, Eliza suggested, or give them to hospitals. I don't need 100 bouquets to know I've been vindicated. Her mother smiled. Still practical to the core. I'm glad some things haven't changed. She dismissed the servants, then sat beside Eliza. I wanted to tell you, the fund has been established, the one for women fighting false accusations. We've already received 3 applications for assistance. That was fast. These situations are more common than anyone wants to admit. Her mother's expression was troubled. One woman's fiancé is claiming she stole from him. Another is accused of adultery by a husband who wants to avoid a costly divorce. They need legal help they can't afford. Then help them, Eliza said firmly. That's why we created it. Over the following weeks, Eliza threw herself into the fund's operation. She met with solicitors, reviewed cases, helped strategize defenses. It felt good to use her experience for something constructive, to turn her suffering into purpose. The Duke visited regularly, always proper, always respectful of the boundaries she'd set. They discussed strategy, reviewed cases, debated legal theories. Slowly, carefully, they built something that felt less like alliance and more like friendship. You're different than you were, he observed one evening. They were in his study, reviewing applications for the fund. Harder, but also freer. I lost everything, Eliza replied. Turns out that's liberating in its own way. I don't care about social approval anymore. Don't fear whispers or judgment. I know exactly how bad things can get, and I survived it. That kind of resilience is rare. It's born from necessity. I wouldn't recommend the process. She glanced at him. You're different too. Less cold. More human. The Duke smiled. Is that a compliment? Observation, though I suppose it could be both. Eliza set down her papers. Are you going to ask your question now? The one you've been building up to all evening? Am I that transparent? To me, yes. What do you want to know? The Duke was quiet for a moment. Then, the fun, the social work, helping other women, is it enough? Does it make up for what was done to you? Eliza considered this. Nothing makes up for it. The months of exile, the humiliation, the betrayal, those scars don't heal just because I won, but helping others? She smiled. That gives the scars meaning, makes them matter beyond just my personal pain. And what about happiness? Not justice or purpose, actual happiness. Do you have that? It was a more perceptive question than Eliza had expected. I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. Some days I wake up angry at everyone who failed me. But yes, I think I'm getting there. Good. The Duke stood, moving to the window. I've been thinking about your condition. The 6 months before I could properly court you. It's only been 2 months, and I'm aware. But I wanted you to know. I'm willing to wait longer if you need it. A year, 2 years. However long it takes for you to be ready. He turned to face her. I'm not going anywhere. Eliza's chest tightened. Why? Why wait for someone as damaged as me when you could have anyone? Because you're not damaged. You're forged, tempered by fire into something extraordinary. He crossed back to her. And because somewhere in the middle of our conspiracy, I stopped seeing you as a useful ally and started seeing you as someone I can't imagine my life without. That's terrifying, Eliza whispered. I know, for both of us. He smiled. But we've faced worse things than intimacy. We'll figure it out. 3 months after the parliamentary session, Christopher Winters went to trial. The proceedings were covered extensively by newspapers, each revelation more damning than the last. The evidence was overwhelming: forged letters, paid witnesses, fraudulent business deals. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Eliza attended the sentencing, sitting in the gallery beside her father. Christopher was brought out in chains, looking hollow and years older than his age. When the judge pronounced sentence, 5 years hard labor plus fines that would bankrupt his family, Christopher showed no reaction. As he was led away, he looked up at the gallery one final time. His eyes found Eliza's. She met his gaze steadily, feeling nothing but a distant sort of pity. This broken man had once been someone she'd loved, someone she'd imagined building a life with. That person was gone, if he'd ever really existed. Christopher looked away first. After the trial, Eliza walked through London's parks, needing air and space to think. The autumn leaves were turning, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson. Beautiful. Temporary. Life moving forward regardless of human drama. Eliza! She turned to find Margaret hurrying toward her, slightly breathless. I've been looking everywhere for you. There's news. Marcus Thorne fled the country, left last night before his trial could begin. Eliza felt a flicker of frustration. So he escapes justice. Not quite. He's broke. His family disowned him. He's in France with nothing but the clothes on his back and no prospects. Margaret smiled grimly. It's not prison, but it's punishment. He'll spend the rest of his life running from debts and looking over his shoulder. It wasn't the ending Eliza had wanted for Marcus, but it was an ending nonetheless. Good, she said simply. Let him run. They walked together in comfortable silence, two friends slowly relearning trust. I'm getting married, Margaret said suddenly. Next spring. Lord Westbrook, you remember him? The quiet one who collects books? I remember, Eliza smiled. He's kind. You'll be happy with him. I hope so. Margaret hesitated. Will you come? To the wedding? I know it's asking a lot after everything, but I'll be there, Eliza interrupted. We're rebuilding, remember? That includes celebrating good things together. Margaret's face lit up. Thank you. That means more than you know. 6 months to the day after the parliamentary session, the Duke appeared at Harrington House with a formal invitation to dinner. Not a business meeting, not a strategy session, a proper social engagement. Eliza's mother fussed over her appearance, pulling out dresses and jewels like they were preparing for a royal audience. It's just dinner, Eliza protested. It's not just dinner, and you know it. Lady Catherine held up a deep green silk gown. This one. It brings out your eyes. Mother, we're not... He hasn't actually proposed anything. You're just two people who've been circling each other for half a year, waiting for the right moment. Her mother smiled. Trust me, I recognize courtship when I see it. The dinner was at the Duke's private residence, an elegant meal served in a dining room that somehow felt intimate despite its size. They talked about everything and nothing: books, politics, gossip, the fund's latest cases. The conversation flowed easily, comfortable in a way that felt earned rather than natural. Over dessert, the Duke set down his fork and looked at her directly. It's been 6 months, he said. Eliza's pulse quickened. It has. So I'm going to ask my question now, properly. He stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. Lady Eliza Harrington, not because you need rescuing, and not because I need redemption, but because I genuinely cannot imagine facing the rest of my life without you in it. Will you marry me? Eliza looked down at him, this brilliant, damaged man who'd helped destroy her and then helped her rise again, who'd pushed her to be stronger than she'd thought possible, who'd waited patiently while she healed. I have conditions, she said. The Duke's mouth curved. Of course you do. I keep working with the fund. It's mine, not ours. I make those decisions independently. Agreed. We marry as equals, not as Duke and subordinate, but as partners. I won't be managed or controlled. I wouldn't dream of it. And, Eliza paused, you have to promise that if I ever start to lose myself, to become someone I'm not to please society or you or anyone else, you'll call me on it. Remind me who I am. The Duke's expression softened. That's an easy promise to make, but I'd like one in return. What? Promise me the same thing. If I start slipping back into the man I was, cold, manipulative, empty, you'll pull me back. He took her hand. We keep each other honest, keep each other human. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. Yes, I can promise that. Then do I have your answer? She looked at him for a long moment, this man who represented both her lowest point and her greatest triumph. Marrying him was risky, complicated. Nothing about their relationship had been simple or easy, but it was real. Hard-won and honest and built on something stronger than romance or convenience. Yes, Eliza said. I'll marry you. The Duke slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple band with a single emerald, green as new leaves. Nothing ostentatious, just beautiful. I had it made specifically for you, he said. The stone is flawless. It's been through fire and pressure and came out perfect, seemed appropriate. Eliza laughed through her tears. You're terrible at romance. I know. You'll have to teach me. He stood, pulling her up with him. Though I should warn you, I'm a slow learner. Good thing I'm patient. They were married in the spring, in a ceremony that was deliberately small and private. Just family and close friends. No grand society spectacle. No performance for the masses. Margaret stood as Eliza's witness, her own wedding scheduled for the following month. Lord Harrington walked Eliza down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. Lady Catherine sat in the front row, looking more peaceful than Eliza had seen her in years. The Duke's vows were simple and direct. I promise to challenge you, support you, and never underestimate you. I promise to be honest even when it's difficult. And I promise to spend every day earning the trust you've given me. Eliza's were equally straightforward. I promise to keep you human, to remind you that power without purpose is meaningless. And I promise to love you, not despite our complicated history, but because of it. We made each other better. We'll keep doing that. The reception afterward was hosted by Lady Pemberton, who transformed the event into a celebration of women's resilience. Every woman who'd received help from the fund was invited. The evening became less about Eliza's marriage and more about the community they'd built. Eliza watched from the edge of the ballroom, the same ballroom where she'd once been destroyed, feeling the full weight of how much had changed. Remarkable, isn't it? The Duke appeared beside her, champagne glasses in hand. 6 months ago, these people wanted to crucify you. Now they're celebrating you. People are complicated, Eliza replied, capable of both cruelty and growth. I'm trying to focus on the growth part. Very diplomatic of you. I'm learning. She accepted the champagne. Besides, I don't need their approval anymore. I proved I could survive without it. That makes it easier to accept when they offer it. The Duke raised his glass. To survival, then. And to whatever comes next. To whatever comes next, Eliza echoed. They stood together, watching London's elite dance and gossip, and slowly, imperfectly, become something better than they'd been. Later that evening, Eliza found herself on the terrace, looking out over the city that had tried to destroy her. The gas lamps glittered like stars. Music drifted from the ballroom. Somewhere out there, Christopher Winters was serving his sentence. Marcus Thorne was running from his debts. And she was here, married, happy, free. Her mother joined her at the railing, wrapping a shawl around Eliza's shoulders against the cool evening air. Your grandmother would be proud, Lady Catherine said quietly. She fought similar battles in her time. Never got the vindication you did, but she never stopped fighting. I wish I'd known her better. She'd have loved you, recognized herself in you. Her mother paused. I'm sorry, I didn't see that sooner. Didn't fight for you the way she would have. You're fighting now. That matters. They stood together in silence, 3 generations of women connected by resilience and hard-won wisdom. What happens now? Her mother asked. Now that you've won? Eliza considered the question. She'd reclaimed her reputation, married a man she loved and respected, built something meaningful with the fund. By any measure, she'd achieved everything she'd fought for. But winning wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. Now, Eliza said slowly, I figure out what kind of legacy I want to build. The fund is a start, but there's more work to do, more women to help, more systems to change. You're going to make enemies, the kind who don't forgive easily. I've already made enemies, survived them too. Eliza smiled. Besides, I have advantages now I didn't have before. A title, resources, a partner who's brilliant at strategy. We can do real damage to the systems that enable this kind of cruelty. That's my daughter, Lady Catherine said with fierce pride. Never content with personal victory, always looking for the next battle. Someone has to fight them. They returned to the ballroom together. The Duke met Eliza's eyes across the room, and she saw understanding in his gaze. He knew what she was planning, the work they'd do together, the changes they'd force into a resistant world. He smiled and raised his glass in silent salute. Eliza returned the gesture, feeling anticipation kindle in her chest. The past 6 months had been about survival, about reclaiming what was stolen and proving her worth to a world that had dismissed her. But the future? The future was about transformation, about ensuring no other woman would have to fight as hard as she had, about building something that would outlast her own story. The orchestra struck up a waltz. The Duke crossed the ballroom and extended his hand. Dance with me, he said, before we start changing the world. Eliza took his hand, letting him pull her into the familiar rhythm of the music. They moved together with the ease of partners who'd learned to anticipate each other's steps. Around them, London's elite swirled in their finery, gossiping and judging and slowly, reluctantly, evolving. And at the center of it all stood Lady Eliza Blackmore, No longer the woman who'd been destroyed at a glittering ball, but the woman who'd risen from those ashes to remake the world that had tried to break her. The music swelled, the Duke pulled her closer, and Eliza smiled, feeling not like someone who'd merely survived, but someone who'd transcended. This was her legacy. Not the scandal, not the exile, not even the triumphant return, but the choice, made daily and deliberately, to transform suffering into strength, to turn personal pain into collective power, to refuse to be defeated even when defeat seemed inevitable. She'd fallen from grace once, she'd clawed her way back, and she'd use every lesson learned in that brutal journey to make sure the next woman's path was easier. The dance ended, the guests applauded, and Lady Eliza Blackmore, survivor, fighter, transformer of worlds, stepped forward into the rest of her extraordinary life.